this year to try to align it a little bit better with what the rest of Texas does, and changing a few things, and we're implementing that this year. I still get to teach as a dean, so I teach the non-majors class for biology. I also teach the seminar course for our senior biology majors, which is their capstone course. And then when I get a chance, occasionally, I get to teach ornithology, which is my background. I was a bird person starting off in biology, and I still continue to try to get out there as much as I can in the field as a biologist. So thank you.
Also, I'm joined by Sherry McCullough on my cell phone, who's monitoring the meeting via the web, and sorry she can't be here. Sherry, you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'd be happy to. I'm still not able to see anything on my computer screen. My name's Sherry McCullough, and I'm an associate professor in science education at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi.
Thank you. I just emailed you, Sherry, a link to the website.
I tried that link as well, and it does not work either.
Well,
I continue to get a picture of an empty boardroom, and I'm sure there's some people there.
There are. I promise you there are. I'm sorry. I've let them know about it, so hopefully we'll
okay.
keep trying again every now and then.
I will.
And hope it'll work. Okay. Thank you for your patience.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks. Also, John Plake from the University of Texas at Tyler is not joining us remotely by phone, but he's monitoring the meeting as well. So he's here as well. Okay, Sherry, they say that if you refresh your screen or try the link again, that it should be running, although I don't know why I'm talking to you if you can't get the link and can't hear me. But I'll try. Okay, thank you. One of our first orders of business is we need a volunteer or an election to have a recording secretary. We need to do this before we vote for chair, because voting for chair is our first official act that needs to be recorded by our recording secretary. So if one of you is willing and able to do that, I would certainly appreciate a volunteer. It doesn't have to be anything real exhaustive, because again, we're recording the meeting, but just we need someone to take careful note of our votes, of the wording of motions, to keep track of major points that are made, keep a list of the major discussion items. You don't need to write in minute detail that Bridget Kirkpatrick disagreed and was agreed with Debbie Barton. That it doesn't have to be that specific, but we do need to keep a record of the items that were discussed and the final decisions that were made. So do we have any volunteers? That'd be all right? It's up to the two of you.
Up to you.
I love Jennifer. Shall we flip for it, or show of hands? Scissors, paper, I love it. Let's do it scientific method. Okay, do rock, scissors, paper, okay? Oh man. Rats. I was really hoping that would be a coordinating board precedent set. I was hoping that we would, that's how we would settle things from now on. Rats. All right. Well, thank you very much, Vanda. I appreciate you doing that. We all do. Our first official act is to vote for our co-chairs. Now, the co-chairs will be the ones who actually run the meeting. This is not the coordinating board's committee. It's the state of Texas's committee. Your job is to advise the coordinating board on the field of study, but the choice of the field of study comes from you. So we need to have you run your own meeting and come to your own conclusions. So we need to have two co-chairs, one from a 4-year institution, one from a 2-year institution. So I told you via email before the meeting began to please give some thought if you're willing to serve as one of the co-chairs. So can I just get a show of hands of those who would like to be nominated for chair? Co-chairs? Okay. I'm seeing, okay, 4, I'm seeing 4, okay. Would you like to say a few words about your, again, reintroduce yourself a little bit and maybe elaborate a bit on what you would like to see the committee do or what you would like to contribute as chair? Can we just go around to the right like we did before? Sorry, Dr. Ball, were you? Can you turn your mic on and make sure the red light?
I was looking for green. Okay, I'd like to see the committee make an easier way for courses to transfer in the sense that, although some of the numbers are the same, but some aren't, but they're also supposed to transfer perfectly to another course. I think we need to look at those courses very carefully. When I first started putting in what's covered in what you call Biology 1, but for science majors, we call Biology 1406. And even amongst my faculty and myself, because I teach that too, it's different. I mean, basically the same, but you have this huge book with many, many chapters, and the teachers get to select the chapters. So I think some more consistency could be talked about and say, make sure these, maybe not chapters, but these types of science are covered. These points are covered, and they leave the class knowing A, B, and C. The other thing is, because of Blinn being so close to Texas A&M, we get a lot of Blinn students. And sometimes they have very different backgrounds than what the TAMU College Station students have. Not that they aren't able to pick up, but it would be nice if they could come in and fit right in. Blinn's 2 years, right? Yeah, because I was getting them at the 3rd year, yeah.
So, my name's Jim, and my interest in serving would be to, and my interest in the committee is to try and develop a field of study that accomplishes 2 kind of primary goals. I do a lot of work outside of the college, working with local industries, professional groups, and that. I'm actually president of the Texas Association of Environmental Professionals. And we definitely want students that are well prepared coming out of the community colleges into the universities and out of the universities into the workforce. One of the things I run into most frequently as chair of my division is working with students who are transferring to one of any number of universities within the state, many of whom have different course requirements within their degree plans. And I think I see a field of study providing maybe a little more flexibility and adaptability to be able to successfully make that leap by allowing the students to maybe concentrate a little more on some of the sciences that would interest them, so that when they're making their transfer and they're making that jump to the university level, they have maybe a better sense of what they want to accomplish once they get there. So I think in a nutshell, that's what I'm interested in.
So again, I'm Bridget Kirkpatrick from Collin College. I work extensively with on articulations through biotech through the state of Texas. There are 4 major colleges that offer biotechnology, and I work with trying to develop those articulations with a number of 4-year universities. And some of the problems with transferring are there's great difficulty because there are no sophomore level courses that transfer universally in the state of Texas, and I think that that's a real problem, and our students really have a difficult time with their pathway in biology, trying to get from 2-year to 4-year and not having to repeat courses. And I think that's one of the things that I'd like to see addressed by this committee.
At Midwestern, we just went through, as I said, one big curricular revision with biology, which was, as curricular revisions go, it was pretty painful, lots of opinions, lots of ideas. And we went from a very traditional botany zoo curriculum more to something that is more consistent with other faculty, other departments are offering. But it was really difficult to sort of get past that botany zoo intro sequence. And then the problem was they were getting into a sophomore year with their next set of courses being where where the courses that really challenge them in ways that challenge their discernment in biology, I guess, to word it in an appropriate way. And that was very hard because they'd already invested a great deal. So we've redone our curriculum, our entry-level curriculum in biology to try to accommodate better transferability of courses. They're implementing it right now. We're looking at now the staffing issues and how do you teach two curricula at the same time to try to teach out those students on the older degree plan and how to bring in the new degree plan. It's been an interesting opportunity, I think, because it has taken a lot of very deep-seated opinions and try to change that for Midwestern to try to change that intro curriculum. We've done a similar thing in math. In that case, it was not necessarily transferability, it was progress through the major, progress to graduation, where we had a low number of graduates in math. And so seeing through those two curricular revisions, at Midwestern, sort of seeing how we could grow our programs. That was substantial to see where our students are coming in to MSU from other universities. We have a very high number of students transferring in and trying to make sure they don't lose as much in that transition coming to MSU. And I think that our new curriculum in biology is going to do that. And so it's interesting to see, looking at some of the data that has been shared for this meeting, what other schools are doing, and then seeing that the direction we're heading is probably the right direction, but seeing, okay, what's next, to be able to, since we're early on in that process, to perhaps alter ours a little bit to ensure that we stay consistent with the course mapping. And I do agree that sophomore year is really a challenge. We continue, I think, to see it as a challenge. So I'd be interested in seeing where that goes and being a part of this as that process proceeds.
Wow, thank you very, very much. So we have two candidates from four-year institutions, Judith Ball and Margaret Brown Marsden, and we have two candidates from two-year institutions, Jim Doberstein and Bridget Kirkpatrick. I passed around slips of paper for a ballot, but we could also just do this by show of hands, or if you've already filled out a ballot, do you feel strongly, would you like to just do a show of hands to make it quicker? Would you rather do a paper ballot? Do you have any strong opinions? Shall we just do a show of hands? Yes. Any objections? Okay. All right. Well, let's take our two-year colleges first. Either Jim Doberstein or Bridget Kirkpatrick. All those for Jim Doberstein, please. Amanda, can you do a head count here? Okay, you sure? Okay. And all those for Bridget Kirkpatrick? Okay, all right, so it'll be Jim Doberstein. Thank you very much. Congratulations. And our other two candidates, Judith Ball from Texas A&M Commerce and Margaret Brown Marsden from Midwestern State. So all those for Judith Ball, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. All those for Margaret Brown Marsden? Good.
I cannot count that fast.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Now, I know that we've only been in order for 30 minutes, but we get our first break because I would like to retire with our two co-chairs for a few minutes to talk with them about what the meeting needs to accomplish and give them a little orientation and talk to them a bit about where the meeting needs to go. So that will be for about 10 minutes. So if you'd like to refresh your cup of coffee, I should have told you anyway, there's of course restrooms in the middle of the hallway here. At the end of the hallway, if you go out the doors here to the left, over near where you first entered the building, there's a break room which has some vending machines there for both food and drinks and coffees if you are interested in that at any point through the meeting. Of course, we've got coffee and water over here as well. All right, so for those in the technical booth, we will stand adjourned, not adjourned, but have a break for the next 10 minutes or so. And if our two co-chairs would like to join me over here in the corner, I'll give you a little rundown of what's coming up. Thank you. Okay, folks, thank you for your patience. I appreciate that. What we need to do is we need to divide up the terms of the committee members. The way that advisory boards like this for the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board work, or committee members have staggered terms. So we'll have staggered terms of 2, 4, and 6 years on this committee. It's a little strange for this committee because we only meet once every 5 years. In 5 years, we'll come back and revise, take a fresh look at this field of study and see if any updates need to be made based upon any enrollment data or pushback or feedback we've gotten from institutions, and of course changes in the discipline that need to be taken into consideration. It might be a little later than 5 years, but 5 years will be the earliest that we reconvene. So I'm not exactly sure what those of you with 2 or 4 year terms are really being asked to do, but there is a possibility that we could have another meeting if there was some major situation that developed, or if we had a serious problem with some of the colleges or universities that really wanted us to revisit or take a look at the field of study again, where something just clearly was not working. It had good intentions, but it just wasn't working. We could call people back. Also, the field of study that we choose will be sent out for public comment for 30 days to all institutions and the public. And we might get some significant feedback from institutions. If we get a lot of feedback, we could call the committee back again in 2 months from now or so to meet and discuss those public comments. If there's not that many of them, or if they're not terribly substantive, then I can summarize them and email them to you, and perhaps we can meet via teleconference and take care of it that way. We can't have email meetings, though, because of Texas public meeting laws. Any votes that we take, which would include voting whether or not to accept certain public comments, need to be broadcast, need to be available for the public to attend a meeting. So those would either have to be a teleconference or, again, a meeting back in Austin. So just to take care of a little paperwork, I have in my hand an envelope of little yellow slips of paper, some of which have 2 written on them, some of which have 4 written on them, some of which have 6 written on them. So what we're going to do, with the exception of our 2 co-chairs who automatically get 6-year terms, sorry, I'd like for you to pull a piece out of the hat here and then write your name on it and then give it back to me, and then we'll know what everybody's terms are. And I'll make sure, I'll do the math later and make sure we have an even spread. And if there's not, I may get in touch with you and ask if you're willing to switch. Also, while this is happening, Jim, if you wouldn't mind, we need to get you up here up front. So, Manish, could I impose upon you to swap places with Jim? Yes. And that way, the camera who's looking straight up here can make sure we get our 2 co-chairs on camera. Okay. So.
Yeah.
Minutes. Yeah. Can I get the business card?
Marcy. I go with Marcy, yeah. It doesn't match though. My parents okay. And anytime you make a noise, your video pops up, so people read and want it. You kind of do. That's right. And you know, they may not want you to see what they're doing with their office at the time, but. So I don't know why. We're used to it in person. It's totally fine. Maybe only the facilitator will take the video, but.
Okay, sorry for all the blank ones. Now, next, if you would please write your name on that yellow slip of paper, and next time we take a break, if you would put them on the table over there on the corner, that would be great, and I'll collect them at some point during the meeting. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Well, finally, we can get down to it now that we've gotten all of our business taken care of. So I appreciate your patience with all that. Can you hear me? What I'd like to do now is to give you just a general introduction to what the field of study is, to make sure we're all clear on exactly what fields of study are, what the fields of study are not, and what the purview of our committee here is. You see on your desk, I hope you got a copy of the Coordinating Board Strategic Plan, our 60 by 30 strategic plan. This might be very familiar to many of you. If it's not, then I encourage you to really look through it carefully, because this is the overall direction that the Higher Education Coordinating Board is trying to go. And many, if not all, of our initiatives are designed and very firmly linked to several of the initiatives that are specified in 60 by 30. The goals of 60 by 30, quickly put, are one, to have 60% of all Texans between ages 25 and 34 have a college degree by the year 2030. It's a pretty ambitious goal. Another is to have 550,000 students complete a degree or certificate in the year 2030. The third goal is to have all students graduate with identifiable marketable skills. And the fourth is to have undergraduate student debt not exceed 60% of first-year wages by the year 2030. All of those are doable, but each discipline, each college, each university is going to have to find its own ways, its own path to doing that. And we're hoping that the fields of study will contribute to this in a couple of important ways. One of which is that we want all college courses to transfer at the lower division, if they can. All the courses that are in the academic course guide manual, all courses that are in the workforce education course guide manual are guaranteed to transfer. But what's happening is that students are losing hours. They're taking too many credit hours. For example, if they're going to a college, they're taking courses that don't apply to their degree plan. So just because a course transfers doesn't mean it matters to a degree plan. And students will sometimes take a number of courses, and they'll get to a university and say they wanted to major in biology, but they find out that they still have to take 3 or 4 or 5 more courses because they didn't choose wisely in their core curriculum or for their electives when they were at the college. And this is what the field of study specifically is trying to solve. So by doing that, we're hoping that by easing transfer, this will help create a more educated population, will create better success among students, we'll have more people finishing their college degrees, and by finishing with fewer wasted credit hours that didn't apply to a degree plan. I shouldn't say wasted, no education's wasted, but by reducing the number of hours taken that don't apply to a degree plan, that will also help reduce student debt. This is part of a portfolio of solutions that the coordinating board is working on. Field of study is just one thing among others. We want students to have a degree plan, which is required when a student accumulates 30 semester credit hours. Of course, better advising all around the board. We have a 42 semester credit hour core curriculum that's required of all students. We have programs of study, which are blocks of lower division career and technical education courses that transfer. We have our academic course guide manual of courses that are guaranteed to transfer, and a common course numbering system, which we dearly wish more institutions would take advantage of. Here's what the field of study is. This is what's written in the Texas Education Code. If a student successfully completes the field of study developed by the board, that block of courses may be transferred to a general academic teaching institution and must be substituted for that institution's lower division requirements for the degree program for the field of study into which the student transfers. And the student shall receive full academic credit towards the degree program for that block of courses transferred. The key word here is must, because what that means is that every university must accept the field of study as their lower division requirements. If they offered something different in their lower division, that's fine, but once they get a transfer student, if that student transfers in with an 18-hour, say, field of study, then 18 hours towards that university's degree plan have been completed by that student. If a student completes part of the field of study, then they get credit for the courses that they completed. If a student's enrolled in more than one institution, blah, 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 they go with the institution where they're classified as degree seeking. That happens a lot, by the way. Each institution must note field of study courses on students' transcripts. And for our committees like this one, they're drawn from up to 24 members, drawn equally from 2- and 4-year institutions. This was a concern in the 85th legislature. And for that, I'd kind of like to turn this slide over to my colleague, Gary Tomlin, who's here, who's our Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Workforce and Colleges. And he gets the privilege of attending many more legislative subcommittee hearings than I do. And I'd like for him to say a few words about the legislative history behind this.
Alan buried me back here on the third row, and so I'll stand up. Hopefully you can hear me. But as Alan said, my name is Gary Tomerlin. I'm Deputy Assistant Commissioner of Workforce here at the Coordinating Board. And, you know, I do want to echo what Alan has already said. You know, thank you all for your time and your service and what you're doing for students. It's very important that faculty members have these conversations. Just maybe a little bit of background information. We had the business administration and management folks in here last Thursday, Friday. We have psychology in here. I think it's next Thursday, Friday. But Alan talked about during this past legislative session that the field of study was a priority, and it's really transferability was a priority. And there's Senate hearings that you can go find if you're interested in listening, and basically several senators expressed that they're tired of their constituents calling and saying, hey, my son or daughter took all these courses and they won't transfer and they won't apply, and you know, fix this. And they actually created a task force. They, meaning the Senate, created a task force. Out of that task force came several different pieces of legislation, all authored by Senator West. They did not pass this past session, but will they be brought up again? Yes or no? I don't know. You know, but we're a year away from session. One of the bills would have required us to complete 25 fields of study in the interim from last session to the start of this next session. And I just kind of briefly told you what we're doing this month. We think we'll make the 25, even though the statute did not pass. We have a plan that we're implementing with y'all's help to hopefully do the 25. And it was, as you probably are all aware, it was a very tight financial year this past session. We actually got a little bit of money to work on fields of study. And, you know, when you work at state level money, sometimes we throw around millions of dollars. It was nowhere near that ballpark at all. It was a little bit of money, a little bit of extra staffing and support. But working to make the 25. We think we'll be successful in getting that goal, but it's very important that y'all faculty come in, work on these conversations, have these conversations, and then once we get past the 25, there's already conversation about the next 25. And so we're going down this road. Hopefully it will help the community colleges and the universities work together. Not saying that they're not working together now, but more collaboratively, and hopefully we'll start turning out better students, more efficient students, less accumulated hours beyond associate degrees, and that kind of stuff. Alan talked about the timing and when these committees reconvene and that kind of stuff. I personally hope that eventually these committees become somewhat organic, if you will. We have to do it in a public meeting space, as Alan has said. State law requires that. But hopefully the disciplines eventually, by working together, get the collective synergy of the state. And if we need to reconvene a meeting, we can reconvene a meeting if it helps put another piece of the puzzle in place. Talking about the ACGM course as an example, if rewriting a course description, adding a learning outcome, any of those kind of things help level the playing field, I hope we get there. Now, I'll tell you that I hope we don't want to get 24 people to come to Austin to have a conversation about the word A as an example in a course description, that if it said A, that instead of, it's got to be a productive use of all of our times, efforts and energies, the cost of all of y'all attending. And quite honestly, I'll finish this and I'll be quiet. If you have any questions, I'll go at those as well. But one of the reasons why we tried to schedule the meeting the way we did, of starting this afternoon and then wrapping up into the morning, is hopefully kind of laying out the playing field for you, start that conversation, let you kind of get into the weeds, if you will, and then adjourn today and then come back in the morning and hopefully come up with a plan by tomorrow. That's not an absolute requirement. I will tell you, business administration and management, they did it. No peer pressure or anything like that. Hopefully it's about minimizing costs to you and your institution. We thought most of y'all could travel in this morning, have one night of hotel lodging tonight, and then travel back tomorrow. And so accelerating the schedule, yes, minimizing costs to the institution, because it's very expensive. We're going to be asking your institutions to send people from 25 different disciplines, as I said. And so this is a major initiative. It's important that y'all, all the colleges have a voice, and we do the outreach, and we're transparent and all that kind of stuff. And if anybody's got any questions of me about field study or that kind of stuff, I'll be glad to answer them.
Okay. Thank you.
When I said I would be quiet, one last comment. I will tell you that in one of the disciplines, I won't tell you which one, but a person said, this is bad law. Who do we talk to about getting it repealed? And obviously it's that pink granite building down that way. That's way above my pay grade. But I will tell you that I don't think they think this is bad law. And so I think it's a very important conversation. And if we can help, just tell us what we need to do to try to make it as productive for y'all as possible. Alan?
Thank you. Well, it's a bad law if we implement it badly. It would be great if this is done well. Colorado does it, Tennessee does it, but nobody like the size of Texas has tackled something like this on this kind of scale to make transfer so seamless between not just 2-year to 4 years, but 4-year to 4 years. Because basically what we're saying is that if you've taken these classes at any institution, public institution in Texas, you have completed the lower division requirements for biology at all Texas public institutions. And it wouldn't be surprising to me, based on our example here, if we do this job well, that other states may get on board with similar kinds of legislation. These are the fields of study that we've already completed recently. Some go back quite a ways, back to the year 2000, but these are ones, most of these we've done fairly recently. These are the ones that we're doing in the next several weeks, this next batch here. Psychology, kinesiology, and criminal justice are coming up here in the next couple of weeks. Advisory committees like this one, we've really already talked about how they work. Sometimes there are fewer than 24 members because there are fewer than 12 universities who have majors in that discipline. And if there are only 8 universities with a major in kinesiology, then obviously we'd have 8 universities and 8 colleges on a committee. Everything we do goes through the board process here at the coordinating board. We have a subcommittee called the Committee for Academic and Workforce Success, or CAWS. They meet a month before the full board, and everything has to go through them. So any rules about forming this committee, your presence here and membership on the committee was approved by the board, and then of course the final curriculum that we approve. Also, there'll be a 30-day public comment period, as I mentioned, once we produce our field of study. So there'll be a delay with that as well. And the board meets quarterly, so we can't move often as quickly as we like. We're constrained by the quarterly board meeting schedule and the 30-day public meetings. I've already talked pretty much about how the committee membership works here. Here's what we'll do today. We'll review the approved courses in the academic course guide manual. We'll decide on the relevant core curriculum courses. We'll decide on the total semester credit hours for the field of study. We'll decide which lower division courses are absolutely necessary for success in upper division level courses. And although we should be cautious about this and do it conservatively, but this committee does have the authority to adjust the academic course guide manual course descriptions and student learning objectives if necessary. If you think that instead of us following the academic course guide manual, the academic course guide manual can follow us. If you feel strongly that in order to make the field of study a success, there's some changes in the academic course guide manual that are necessary. It's also possible, although very, very rare, to add a course to the academic course guide manual if you think that's absolutely necessary. That's what happened on Friday when the business committee met. They liked a course that was in the workforce education manual, but it wasn't in the academic course guide manual, and so they wanted to create a new course. And that's what we'll do. Here's a sample field of study, what they look like. This is a simple one. This was Mexican American Studies. It's pretty direct. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 courses, plus a Spanish course. You can see, in a way, it's kind of a no-brainer because all the course titles have the phrase Mexican American in them, and they belong in the Mexican American field of study. Pretty straightforward. This is a more complicated one. This is civil engineering, okay? This is another kind of field of study that I suspect will be a little bit like what we'll do in biology, where the courses are drawn from more than one discipline, not just from biology, but from math, from physics, from botany, from biology, from chemistry. There are many of these courses can serve double duty for the core curriculum. Some of them can't. Some of them have labs, so that needs to be taken into consideration in the total number of semester credit hours. So it can get a little more complicated. And finally, the field of study isn't effective if it isn't used. All universities are required to accept the field of study as the equivalent of their lower division curriculum, but not all universities are required to have all those courses offered in their lower division curriculum. We can't force universities to make the field of study identical to what it is they're already doing. What that means is that when a student transfers in, they'll have to give that student credit for courses in their degree plan that best match what is in the field of study. Do you follow me? So we are hoping that over time, if this field of study is a success, that both colleges and universities will start to use this field of study as the bedrock, as the format for their lower division. It will make things easier for the transfer students, and it will prevent the problem where different native students and transfer students have different learning experiences by having taken different courses for the same major. So part of your job here today after this meeting is over is I hope you'll be motivated to be an advocate for the field of study with your colleagues in biology, with your institutions, with your peer institutions, to try to use your influence to try to get the field of study adopted as widely and as efficiently as possible. And I would be more than happy to help you as time goes by with that effort. So please, I hope you keep my name and email address and phone number on file and stay in touch, and I'll be happy to help you as time goes by. Any questions for Gary and I or about the mechanics of field of study and how it works and it over.
I guess the first thing I'd like to say is thank you for letting me sort of serve this role. Hopefully I can make sure that everybody's heard, everybody has their both their own institutional voice as well as the voice of the broader student population around Texas in mind and represented here in the conversation. And I guess, would you like to have any opening?
Actually, she speaks for me as well. Thank you.
So in our sidebar conversation that we had during the break, we talked a little bit about how to proceed. And one of the things I guess probably all of us have acknowledged, because hearing when people did their introductions around the room, is that biology is a pretty variable subject. And the way it has been approached, at least when we got the big spreadsheet, is pretty variable as well. We have a lot of courses that are represented that have been transferred in the past or that are kind of on the books as far as the biology curriculum is concerned. And so we thought at least at first we might sort of present the big picture that we have to reach at the end of our meeting and what the context of that big picture might be. And that is that, as has just been described in the PowerPoint, we need to come up with a set of 6 to 8 classes, not necessarily all in biology, but certainly representative of what a student in biology would need to know at the 2-year level to complete that associate's degree, and then to go to the 4-year level to complete a bachelor's degree that would be transferable to that program at the bachelor's level. So those 6 to 8 classes constitute about 18 credits. So we have a pretty narrow window in which to work to be able to fit. So there's lots of courses, as you had on that spreadsheet, there are a lot of courses to choose from. And if we chose to talk perhaps about every single one of them, we might wind ourselves up in the weeds a little bit. And maybe there are some favorite courses that we have. Our institutions might teach particular courses, but we're going to have to try to identify something common. So if we keep that in mind, that there are about 6 to 8 courses that we're trying to identify, that's a good way to kind of start, I think, with that big picture. That slate of 6 to 8 courses we'll take back to our institutions to share the information certainly with them about our experience on this committee. And then certainly it will go out to public comment and to other universities to be able to read through and make their comments about it. And perhaps we may have to come back and look at it slightly more at length if we find that there's a lot of variability or the field changes of biology changes. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So I have a quick question. You say 6 to 8 courses, but we're really talking about 60 credit hours, right? For 2 years of...
Yeah, but we're getting then the 18 field of study credit hours, but some of those courses, some of those credit hours may apply. So what we saw with engineering, for example, there were some courses that counted for the core. So we may find that these might be core courses, for example, in math, for biology perhaps, that would be counted. So if we go beyond that, if we have more than, let's say, the 18 hours, it might be that they count for a core class.
Okay.
Okay. So this biology field of study, I guess, we also talked a little bit more generally. Okay, there's a specific task of 6 to 8 classes, but there's also maybe the broader task of, and then we're going to revisit this question later, I think, but the broader task of providing perhaps a student with similar content knowledge that they could be successful in all of our various programs, and even, I can speak of my own institution, tracks within that program, which a student chooses to do cell biology or organismal, for example. But also common rigor for those classes, that we would be able to have a student say, okay, if they completed that 18 hours at a 2-year institution and transferred that, they would have a rigor that was comparable to what they're going to experience in the next degree level that they're going to accomplish. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit, and I guess we'll start with, we're going to start with this, I think, but first we want to sort of set some guidelines for how we'll have this conversation. I think we're all pretty collegial people, but this just to bear in mind that we want to stay collegial as much as we can. And perhaps if we wind up in the weeds on an item that may be slightly off topic, we'll hold on to that item, but maybe move on to something else if we find that we're lagging a little bit.
I'm going to be the enforcer.
And then the last thing is that when we speak, if we could, because we all know that we have the microphone that we have to switch on, so please bear in mind that you need to switch your microphone on when you speak, and then when you're not speaking, to switch it off. And then the next is to, if you could raise your hand, we're going to both try to recognize people in turn. So if we sort of acknowledge you in that we will keep the running list of who's going to speak next, so you don't necessarily have to hold there with your hand up all the time necessarily, but certainly we'd want to make sure that everybody has a chance to be heard. And so turning on your hand, we'll acknowledge who's next, and we'll identify together who would be the next speaker, and we'll keep an eye on each other as far as recognizing the right people, and then not interrupting when somebody else is speaking. If we can, I think we can all work with that probably. So, but if there is a question we want it to be asked, this is the time. Are there any questions about those guidelines, those rules, those operating principles? Yeah, Uma.
Yeah, I just have a question as to, we are going to go ahead and try to figure out 18 credit hours. I understand that as the FOSS. But then, are we also going to be looking at, should we be looking at different categories of this 18 credit hours? Because it depends on where the student is finally going. Is the student going to be going to medical school? Is the student going to be doing a PhD? So then, the way you prep the students for each of their final goal is going to be slightly different, and I think that'll bring about a difference in the core FOSS courses.
So that's one of the things we discussed in determining how to approach this, and I think Marcy had a really good approach to this, I think, and support, which is to look at it kind of a big picture of things like, what students might need to know outside of the actual curriculum, the thinking being that if we can identify those big picture items, then we can come back and maybe determine, is this something we can accomplish with a common set of courses within one field of study, or do we need to really have tracks kind of like they have in the engineering field of study, for instance?
We have one back there, I think.
Yes.
And then we'll go over to Larry.
Let me add some background information if I can. The 18 is not a definitive cast in stone number. And maybe if I can create a visual for you. I've got a PowerPoint presentation in my first slide. I've got a bunch of buckets on it, and I've got them labeled field of study, program of study, core, dual credit, financial aid, and I don't know, other topics like that y'all all you understand. The 60 semester credit hours, collectively, all of those go into transferability. I probably should put that as a word, right? Those are all subjects that are kind of in play here right now. You as a committee are focused on the biology field of study. The 60 semester credit hour thing is an adjacency. It's part of it, but it's not really here to solve it today. At the community college level, one of the things that's in play is some community colleges require the EDUC 1300, the Learning Framework course, as an example, right? So really and truly, if we go in and create a 60 in biology, then that college has a potential challenge, assuming we name 60 hours, this, that, and we didn't name that course, then we have a potential challenge. So the conversation is really about the field of study. What does it take to be the lower division courses for biology? Yes, you can get into tracks. As an example, and I don't know this, but I would assume that you want them to take biology 1 and 2, and that would probably be at in core courses for all the institutions, right? You might want biology 1 and 2 and chemistry 1 and 2. If so, then you've kind of filled up a couple of core boxes and you filled up a couple of your 18 boxes, right? Little sidebar, in engineering as an example, their first conversations really were more about math, and they wanted calculus. Calculus, always calculus, nothing but calculus. So they were almost more concerned about the core math course, and then the next conversations were really university physics, 1 and 2. So it was almost like they were wanting core courses. And so the core is part of this, but you don't necessarily have to figure all this out. Now, if there's a math course that you all agree that this is the entry-level course, you have to have this course, you can name that course. If it's important for students to come with it, have it, be on par, all that kind of stuff. As I just gave the example in engineering, when we did music and we kind of had that same conversation and said, you want to talk about math? They basically said, we don't care. You know, we'll take any 3-hour, maybe I shouldn't phrase it as they didn't care. I sometimes forget that these things are recorded. But they didn't have any specific criteria for a math course, just fill the core course. And so it varies by discipline. And so for y'all, you're really working, you're focused on the lower division courses in a biology degree. Yes, core is part of it, 60 semester credit hours is part of it, you know. But hopefully, if a student has completed, you know, once you do your work and this is adopted and all that stuff, if a student has completed an associate degree, or I think as Alan has said, a significant number of hours, they transfer to a university and they're lockstep. The courses, they transfer and they apply to the major and the student sequences, you know. And I mean, obviously if a student transfers with 49 hours, the student's not a junior, you know. If a student transfers with 60, you know, then if it's the correct 60 and all that stuff, we understand the student dynamics of it. We're working on the roadmap, you know. We're outlining the plan. Students who take detours and sidebars and all that kind of stuff, you know, we're hopefully helping them, but we can't solve it for them. Okay, if that helps.
Thank you.
Larry.
I think most of us understand what are needed for our biology majors to go on. I was interested in the statement earlier that was made about the complaints that have been pushed towards the legislature, especially by parents, as to what's going on and what's causing this issue. I've received complaints multiple times from parents trying to do transfers in regards to certain things. So it would be nice to know what is the number 1, number 2, number 3 major complaint coming from parents who are trying to help their children to transfer from one institution to another institution. That might help guide us in looking at what we're trying to do, if that can be provided.
Let me give one complaint and then we'll go on to yours. I can tell you one for sure is, why does my medical school bound child need to take botany? Yeah. We had botany as one of our first year requirements, and it seemed to not make sense to many parents. And so botany was just sort of this problem for them, I think. But let's go on over here.
So I think I may have answered this question that I had while listening to everybody else, but I wanted to kind of pose it to the group. I guess my general kind of question and comments is around both degree plans. So for example, Lone Star College has a biology associate's degree now that we put together a couple years ago to kind of help address some of these issues that biologists face when transferring. So what we've done is put together this associate's degree in biology. We've modeled it after other 2-year institutions in the country that have something similar. We also used a document put together by this group from, I think it was 2012, called the Biology Tuning Agreement, which I'm not sure if everyone here is familiar with, but it lists a bunch of biology courses as well as chemistry classes that should be taken as part of your undergraduate first 2 years in biology courses. So my question is, you know, what we're doing is trying to take this associate's degree and use it for articulation agreements to kind of address, I think, a lot of the similar issues that we're charged with addressing here is, you know, if you've taken this set of courses, we're going to count your courses and you can start as a junior in our class. If this group is focused on, what I think we said, about 18 credit hours, I'm assuming that would be something that we could put into an associate degree plan saying, you know, these field of studies courses are your science requirements, so to speak, of your overall 60, if I'm understanding the process correctly. And then the rest of the 60 could be core courses or, you know, government courses, et cetera, that if we then built that into a, say, associate's degree, that might make the articulation agreements easier because now we have the field of study courses in there. Is that kind of where we're going?
I would certainly see that, yeah. I mean, okay. I know that, you know, from the receiving end of those students coming to our institution, that would be very helpful to have that be, and those would map together. And that's, I think, the goal in general is to map them. Do we have any other comments on this general topic? Yeah, go ahead, Bridget.
I think one of the things that we should bear in mind, medical school different tracks, whatever, is to make this as robust as possible so that as students matriculate, whether it's medical school or going into PhD or whatever their interest is, that we've taken that into account in the robustness of this.
And in some ways, I think that that be, to go back to your question, you meant that might be pre-track, in fact, that we might be thinking, regardless of track, these might be courses that all students should have. Exactly. Now, we've been given some, we have the long list of courses, but I think it's best if we can start with a shorter list rather than going through each. We've had the one that was sent in our worksheet that you guys received, but perhaps one starting point is this one that you guys got handed out today?
What that is a list of the top 6 institutions that accept the most transfer students. Those aren't the institutions that have the highest number of biology majors, but those are the ones that receive the most transfer students for one reason or another. I went through in this kind of a kitchen sink list of all the courses that they accept for transfer. Please note that not all those courses are necessarily required in their degree plan, but those are courses that they offer as you can take this course or that course or choose one of the 3 of this list, that kind of thing. That's the list of all the courses that will work towards their degree one way or the other. So you can see the courses, in a snapshot view that are most commonly offered at the institutions that accept the most transfer students.
So in this list, we have, and not to say that this is going to serve as our blueprint, but we can see things that are the most common, least common. So if we're looking at biology, what's interesting is that the 2 commonest ones are chemistry and physics that are on here, that are transferred for those students. And in fact, the variability lies often in the biology, which is in itself variable, I guess, as a field. So perhaps we can, if we want to start with these, anything that sort of has a resounding yes, we believe that this might need to be part of the biology field of study.
Yeah, and I'd kind of like to address this, kind of coming at it from a workforce side, and probably we do a lot of collaborative work with our local universities as well. Something that strikes me is the split lecture labs versus the combined lecture lab course, where you've got a 3-hour lecture and then a lab course that may or may not accompany, depending on the student's track. And I think one of the things we could address that might be important is that what do they need to know on the back end, and maybe what they need to know coming from the sophomore level into the junior level, whether that's between 4-year institutions or between 2-year to 4-year institutions. And I think the laboratory component is a really important one that we need to be sure that we're embedding at this lower level. I think it's too easy for students right now to slip through with a minimum of lab skills, so that when they get to the junior level, they're not well prepared for the rigor of the laboratories that they're going to need to be able to perform. Larry?
And then David after that.
Can we have a show of hands that show that if all the institutions that require the laboratories for their biology and chemistry, because I know that we only have a 6-credit hour requirement. I would just be interested to see, of all of us, how many of us require the lab be taken, especially for general biology.
So let's start with biology first. So general biology, how many require the lab? So it's a pretty uniform. Chemistry require the lab. Again, pretty consistent. Physics. Okay. So I think that's a good question, because we're talking about 3 credits there, basically, that are going to be taken up. And that's just maybe, and I didn't specify first or second semester. Go ahead. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Let's go to David first, and then to you, John.
Yeah, it's just in relation to the 1,300 and 1,100, the lecture and lab being separate. Mm-hmm. We occasionally get those students coming from community colleges where they have taken the 1308 or the 1306 maybe without the lab. When they come and transfer to our program, we have to find a way to work them into a lab-only section, and we don't have a course number for it. Right. So it may be a little bit on the side, but I think that certainly is a difficult problem for us, and it's not a lot of them, but there's some.
I
Definitely.
don't think it's on the side at all. I think that it's probably a more significant issue than is represented in this room. And it is something I think that we have an opportunity to address here in a way that helps the students be a little more prepared.
Okay, John, and then we'll go with Murad, I guess you had your hands up, and then Larry.
Well, I mean, I think most of these institutions, the lab is required. The reason it's separate in a lot of the four-year institutions is because they have a huge lecture, and then they'll have like 20 labs. And so they have to separate the numbers. But I think it should be a requirement that they have the lab too, even if it's separate into two different classes.
Murad, and then Larry.
I was referring to the same point. As far as the lab is concerned. And also in community colleges, normally the lab and the lecture are not separate, courses. They are combined with the 4 credit hour course, so automatically they do have the lab component, part of the lecture component that will take care of the,
Part of the issue, even though I would rather go with the 4 credit hour thing, has to do with our computer programming. PeopleSoft won't allow us to do it. And it doesn't allow us to do it, and so that creates an issue. So it would be, I would love to address that, but you're talking about millions and millions of dollars to convert to a whole new program for us.
Mark.
The reason that at Texarkana that we offer those separate lecture and lab was because of the 60-hour requirement. We had to, 2 or 3 years ago, we had to reduce the number of hours to offer an associate's degree. So we still require lecture and lab sections for all our biology majors, but we did that to accommodate all the folks for our degree, where we had to reduce the number of hours, which was very sad for all of us.
So what I'm getting, I think, is generally we're seeing that lab is definitely something we're wanting students to have. That experience in lab is what is maybe going to define them later in biology. However, problematic in terms of the transferability, whether it's bundled into the class or not bundled in, that can create problems. And that may be something as a side conversation, because we can talk about the logistics of that. I don't know if other panels have had that problem of talking about labs and these 1 credits that go along. Yeah.
I don't think it's so much a logistics problem of whether or not we allow either it bundled or separate, but the students who are going to transfer, and this is where advising becomes important, is, whether at Texas A&M the students come with it as a 4-credit course or a 3 and a 1, we don't care as long as they have it both. But if they come with just the lecture, then yes, that's why they have to repeat courses. And again, so I think to keep it so that the different institutions have the most flexibility in terms of scheduling and things like that is, I would hate to see this committee say it's got to be offered as 4 credits or 3 and 1, but whatever works best for your institution. But again, especially if students are going to transfer, is you need both or it's not going to transfer.
Okay. Sorry, Percy.
For example, some institutions may have the lecture and the lab split in their core, where in one section they'll have the lecture component for 3 credit hours, and in a different section they'll have the lab potentially counting for 2 credit hours. Even though they have to take both general biology courses, it'll be split in 2 different components in the core.
Other comments about the lab question? Yes, go ahead. Switch on your mic, be sure.
Our non-science or our non-biology majors do not take the lab. It's a separate course, and they take the lecture, which is pretty similar, but they don't take the lab. It's only the majors that have to take the lab, and it's a 4-hour course, assuming 1 hour of that is the lab.
And I think that may be true, although it's different at some institutions, and maybe a whole separate course at another, other places too, that the non-majors, and we've seen that on the list that we had to review before coming here. Right. There were non-majors choices and majors choices. Did somebody else, did you have your, no?
David has his hand.
I was just going to, I'm sorry. I was going to add on to what he said, is that whenever we did the core, we put the 2 hours of lab, you have the 6 hours, which the 2 hours in the CAO, the component area adoption. Did anybody else do that? But that, yeah. Okay. And that way they were required because it's in the CAO, but that's how we split it up, but then still kept, we got away from the allowing 6 hours. Our science people were going, no, so anyway, that's what we did, so.
David.
Yeah, I was just going to say again about non-majors. Many times they transfer to our institution and they decide they want to be majors.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've got the 3-hour course, and then we have to figure out how to deal with that issue.
Yeah, and that's a significant. I'm sorry, Larry. That's a significant advising issue because we have that issue. We have that at our college as well, where they start out in one track and they're like, oh, I want to do this other, and that's why I think that's why I brought it up is that whether it's a split or a combined, I don't think is really the question. I think it's really that they're getting that lab exposure, and I think that for whatever it's worth, I think that's worth good even if they're non-majors. I think there's some value in that, but certainly the majors need that going on. Okay, Larry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, some of the major complaints, and one of the reasons I brought this up is from parents calling me and saying, my child took this course for non-majors and now they want to go to this university and they've decided they want to become pre-health. And then the university turns around and says, well, this won't qualify for that. And to me, that probably creates a lot of the complaints that we see even at the legislature level where we have this thing with non-majors. And I've been reviewing the learning outcomes on these non-majors, like for biology, for science majors too, and biology for non-majors for science, and they're the same learning outcomes. So it's not making any sense to me why we have both of them if we're using the same learning outcomes. It's confusing.
I have an email comment that came in from Sherry McCullough, who's following us from Texas A&M Corpus Christi. She says that all require labs at our four-year institution. All of their courses require labs at their four-year institution. They also have made calculus mandatory for biology majors, and if they come in calculus ready, great. If not, then they're required to take pre-calculus or trigonometry in their core and then take calculus. Also, a note about the labs. The intent here is for the same content to be covered and for institutions to have flexibility in scheduling. So as long as we get the content covered, we can leave it to the institutions to schedule it however they see best. And that's really not an issue for the Field of Study Committee to determine. If a lab is required or if we feel that a lab is necessary, then the Field of Study should probably include both the 3+1 option and the 4-hour option and leave it to the institutions to determine what works for their schedule.
Since our comment from our person listening online concerned the math, is it okay if we shift from lab to math for a few minutes? Does that sound good? So we can go, well, I guess I'd like to leave it open to comment as sort of, what are we looking for when they're coming to us? So for example, some of our degree programs, it's in biology, or some of our tracks in math, it's calculus 2. And I'm doubting that we want to make calculus 2 part of that core field of study. I mean, I'm not saying that we wouldn't, but I mean, that is a possibility that we'd choose to have calculus 2. Where are we seeing the level on the math thinking about that level for math of what we'd say would be essential for the biology student? Because really what we're talking about, what do students need to know? What do students need to know if they are a biology student at 2-year or 4-year and transfer those questions? So what do they need to know? Let me start with David, and then somebody else had a question. Go in the back then after that. No, we'll start with you and then we'll go behind you.
What we do at West Texas A&M, we have what amounts to tracks. We've got the pre-healthcare tracks, primarily pre-med, pre-dent, pre-pharmacy, and we require either calculus or statistics. And statistics becomes pretty important because most of the medical schools now are requiring statistics instead of calculus. So that creates an issue for calculus in Calculus 1. For most of our other majors, we require, the college algebra and then either trigonometry or pre-calculus. But, and a lot of my faculty members, we've talked about this before, and there's somewhat of a consensus developing that we think that a good stats course, maybe a 2000 level or above, would be a better choice than trig and pre-calc. So,
Okay.
yeah. But again, that's us.
Okay.
I think I'll just say ditto. Those were my thoughts as well. We don't have calculus in the degree plan for most of our biology majors. If they're a physics major, then those majors do need calculus. But our biology majors, for the most part, would be more advantaged by taking a rigorous statistics course, which would enable them to analyze data, to write papers and read papers on scientific concepts. So I would be disappointed to see us require calculus of all biology majors unless it were a calculus or statistics choice. And I noticed that UT Arlington, it doesn't appear that they have calculus as transferring in for their majors. That seems odd to me. I'm not sure why that would be so.
Okay. We'll go down here.
So we've just switched our math requirement at Texas A&M College Station from 2 semesters of calculus and 1 semester of a 200 level stats to either the 2 semesters of calculus and then 1 semester of calculus-based stats to 1 semester of calculus and 2 of stats, as we've tried to struggle with this. But the quantitative aspect of biology, especially as we go forward in a field, I think can't be overlooked. And so I think to say that no calculus would be needed would be a disservice not to all students, but to many students. And the other question I have is in terms of what we produce at the end of this field of study is, for instance, because I do agree that some students may be better served in what they want to do with the biology degree and maybe just fine without calculus, but in what we come up with, would that then say that Texas A&M could not require their biology students to have 2 semesters of calculus, if that's intended to be completed by the end of their sophomore year? If we said from the field of study that calculus isn't required, then could A&M come back and say, we require our students to come in with calculus completed?
No, not if the field of study is adopted. That's the undergraduate curriculum that you would have to give those students, those transfer students, credit for. You could always require any course you want, but at the upper division level. So you could require different calculus courses at the upper division level.
Okay.
Can I follow up
Sure,
on that?
if you want.
So, but the math departments, for instance, don't offer upper level calculus courses. Would they have to come up with new courses?
Either that or they would have to give transfer students credit for the course that best fits the content that's in the field of study. And that could be your decision. Which of your course offerings is the closest to what is the courses in the field of study?
So if it wasn't calculus, if the field of study decided it wasn't calculus, we would have to give students credit for our calculus requirement that they transferred in.
That's right.
All right, we're going to go with Larry, and then Debbie, you had your hand up earlier? Or? Okay, and then Percy.
I'm in favor of we have calculus 1, and then we also have statistics. The statistics is offered at the junior and senior level. One thing that we need to keep in mind is the changes in our particular field of study that's occurring, especially in this century. I can see things happening that are going to require at least about information on calculus, but I see a lot more level of statistics. Now, at our university, we're not really offering a course that is fully just biology statistics. It'd be helpful. We're trying to do that. But I feel that the calculus is useful for creating the critical mind, helping them to think critically. And I feel that we should have that as a requirement for this field of study.
Go Debbie, and then Percy, and then down to the end.
I actually had a question. We have the articulation agreement with the biomed science for A&M, And I noticed that when we started, they had to have Cal 1, Cal 2. Then they dropped the Cal 2 for the biomedical science requirement. So is that,
So that's a different
yours a straight
department.
biology degree? What you're
That's a
talking
different,
about?
more applied, the BIMS is a different program. And yes, their math requirement is less.
Cal 1, okay. All right.
And it's a business calculus, which doesn't make sense.
Oh, well,
but-
we don't have that, so.
Okay, Percy.
Just a different tact on the two-year perspective. A vast majority of our students take at least one developmental class at the two-year level. And by the time they get in between the 42 to 60 hours, most of them have typically only completed college algebra. And we also have the business calculus, too. We don't have the calc necessarily for the science major. So I'm just wondering how many two-year schools actually offer calculus for science majors.
Can we do a quick poll for those who are two-year schools that do have calculus? Yeah, so we do have it being offered, it looks like, but.
What's the normal number of students enrolled in the course and actually complete the course? Just on average.
I don't doubt that probably varies by institution, but I can, speak for us. Any given semester, I might schedule 3 or 4 sections of Cal 1 with 24 students per section. And those classes they may not fill, but they'll be pretty close. But by the time they get into Cal 2, Cal 3, I might in that same semester only offer 1 section or 2 sections of Cal 3.
Okay, let's go to the back, because I do want to make sure this raises the question. I don't want to fail to acknowledge the group of people that's sitting there. So if I seem like I'm biasing toward the front, please let me know. So go ahead.
I think I'd say our numbers are similar to what Jim is describing at his institution. I think I'd also say that when Cal 1 is a mix of majors, biology majors and chemistry majors and physics and engineering, and when you get to Cal 2 and Cal 3, it's primarily physics or engineering majors who are taking those. Right. And so the numbers definitely do go down.
I'm sorry, I forgot.
So I just wanted to kind of point this out. I think the math is an important conversation to have. But in the back of my mind, I'm kind of keeping tally of the classes that we have for our field of study designation, right? If we're saying that it's 18 credit hours, and assuming that we go with the labs, like I think the general consensus was to kind of go with the labs. If we include biology 1 and 2, that's 2 classes at 8 credit hours. We haven't talked about chemistry yet, but assuming that we follow traditional kind of things, we'll maybe talk about chemistry 1 and 2 with labs. So that's 4 classes. You're already up to 16 credit hours. So I don't know if we can go much beyond that, and then do we want to weigh the value of a math class versus the value of a chemistry class as part of our math discussion, because maybe we decide, well, if we can only do 5 classes that get the FOS distinction, maybe we'd prefer chemistry over math. I'm not saying that there's an answer to this, but I'm just, putting that out there for consideration.
I think that's a good point to make. Let me go with Murad and then Larry, please.
Yeah, just in response to this one, to your point, it could be the chemistry not be used for the field of study, could be used in the core component option, and this way you could really free more hours in the field of study. So
that's a good point.
Yeah, that's true. Larry, and then Uma back there.
Yeah, I agree with you. We actually put chemistry as the core option.
Yes.
I could see, based upon my calculations and what I see the students needing, I see at least 8 courses that would be part of the field of study transfer. So we're talking somewhere around 32 hours of credit in the transfer.
Uma. And then.
I agree with Murad in the sense that we also have applied calculus and statistics for life sciences as part of our core curriculum. And so maybe, we can redistribute them between, and that would help us attain our goal today.
So I think that, was there somebody else who wanted to comment on the math? Bridget?
We just need to be aware of, I think algebra is a prereq for 1406. If we want to go towards calculus, that we either say one or the other, or, and keep that in mind, what prereqs are on there right now.
Okay, that's a good point, yeah. Because prereqs, we don't want to hide something in there and realize that we're actually requiring 10 classes or something. Yeah, David.
Just real quick, algebra and then either pre-calculus or trig serves as a second prerequisite for calculus generally, I think, doesn't it? So you're looking at 3 math classes.
Right. Well, since the point was made about chemistry, let's talk about chemistry, and then we'll get to biology, I promise. But it's obvious that, you know, if we're talking about a lot of these other classes, it's clear that, you know, the general issue of labs, the issue of math, those are where a lot of variability is concerned. So shall we, I guess if anybody would talk about what they see as chemistry, what they're accepting as chemistry, or what they're having in their curriculum as chemistry. So let me start with at the end, and then Larry, and then do I have a third who'd like to be in the queue? Okay, in the back, okay. So go ahead.
So what A&M requires transfer students, if they're coming in with 2 years of transfer, is we require both the first year of chemistry, the intro chemistry. We also want our sophomore students, or require students that are coming in as coming in as juniors or having 2 years, is all of our students need to have organic along with the organic labs, 2 semesters of organic with the labs. And in fact, with the biology, the only thing that for our students transferring in that we really find useful is the first year of intro biology. But then it is, in fact, what we need is to have our students have those foundational courses. So a year of intro chemistry with labs and a year of organic chemistry with labs.
And just to jump in on that point, though, one issue might be, and I'm expecting it probably is that at your institution, is it like a 3,000 or 300 level class, or is it a 2,000 or 200 level class? And that is going to vary between schools.
To 200.
But that can create a problem on advanced credit. So it might just be something to keep in our minds about that too. So go on, Larry, and then we'll go in the back.
Okay. One of the things that I want to point out here is that just like at Texas A&M, we require that we would like to see them do the general chemistry in their freshman year and the organic chemistry in the sophomore year. Our primary reason for that is it sets them up for their junior year, especially pre-health, because in pre-health, the students are working towards actually applying for med school through that next year, and they need to have these courses out of the way so that they can become more focused on that subject matter when they start doing their MCAT just before their senior year and start doing their application process. So I would rather see them be able to transfer in and not worry about that, have that done so they can become more focused, because they only have 2 years to get it done, get the degree, get into med school, dental school, whatever, and that they need to have that all completed.
Go in the back, and then
well, just to follow up with what Larry was saying is that I work at a 2-year institution, and we would love to be able to do that, but there are, like Margaret said, quite a few 4-year institutions that do not take organic as a sophomore level course. So at our 2-year level institution, we don't teach organic because of that reason. And we have our students take chemistry as either their first year or second year. But we do happen to see, and kind of moving back into the math focus, students have to have algebra, college algebra readiness in order to be able to be successful in chemistry. And so we see, just due to a delay in math, a delay in being able to fulfill chemistry requirements, which then delays the organic and then delays the junior and senior level courses. So that's kind of where we're at in offering something like organic, just in the fact that they're not math ready and some institutions won't take it. Yeah.
Okay, one of the problems that we definitely have to address, this committee, is the 2,000 level at the 2-year, and then you go to the 4-year, and it's a 3,000 level, and it will transfer as an elective, but not as direct credit. And if we're going to, we have to make those schools, they don't have to change their numbering system, but they have to take the 2,000 level organic 2 or whatever it is for credit, or it's not going to work. The FOS won't work.
Okay, going down to the end.
I just kind of want to echo that as well. We offer organic at the 200 level at Lone Star. We're somewhat close to A&M, so a lot of our students go there where it does transfer, and that's nice. But having that not transfer to a lot of different institutions here in Texas because of the junior level that they have it, I think really makes, I think the biology field of study specifically much more difficult if our goal here is to get students ready for those junior and senior level biology classes, you know.
Going to Jim and then
So to that end, to aid my understanding, are there, between the sophomore, if the organic series is, has a 200 level rubric or a 300 level rubric, and maybe somebody in the audience can speak to this, are there significant differences in terms of the content or the level of rigor between those, or are they essentially the same course? So if we included that 2000 level in the field of study, and if the field of study is adopted, then that would be the closest match. It almost seems like we'd be addressing that through this process. Am I misunderstanding? I'm kind of looking at Alan to, yeah.
All right, we'll move to Larry, and then to Uma, and then to David.
I have one question. Based upon my understanding what the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board set up, organic chemistry is supposed to be offered at the sophomore level. Could you please tell me what four-year institution is not accepting the organic chemistry at the sophomore level?
One of the universities that a lot of our students transfer to is Stephen F. Austin.
Really?
And so we used to teach organic chemistry, and then they changed to taking that as a 300 level course, and none of our students wanted to take it because it wouldn't transfer. So we had to literally get rid of the entire teaching of those courses. Yeah.
All right, we had Uma, David, and then we'll go with Bridget and John again.
Actually, to answer your question, Jim, we have a lot of transfers coming in from Collin College, and they do organic chemistry, and we do a transfer, but we find that some of our students, though the content that is taught might be the same, the depth that it is taught, or the rigor with which we pose questions or exams or test them is slightly different. And sometimes they transfer, but they have to retake the course in order so that they can be prepared to take the MCAT and be successful and do better. So even though the overall curriculum is the same, it is how deeply it is taught. That's the variation I see when it is coming in terms of transfers.
So they're offering it as a sophomore level course, and you're offering it as a junior level course?
No, we're also offering it as a sophomore.
Oh, I got you. So there might be different levels of rigor. Yeah. Well, that might even be true within institutions as well, and it's something we probably should,
yes.
It's something we need to
Yeah, because I think we said those two at the start. We talked about content and rigor. Those are two aspects we probably want to consider in our course slate that we come up with at the end. Let me go to David, and who did I have next? And then after that was Bridget, I think.
Okay. I was just going to comment that I certainly agree 100% that organic should be a course required of all pre-meds, all the pre-healthcare majors, essentially. Not only because it's something that's going to appear on the MCAT or the DAT, but also because it's a stepping stone to biochemistry. But I wonder if that logic would apply to those in organismal biology, such as ecology and things like that. Do they need two semesters of organic chemistry to be a successful ecologist and go to graduate school in ecology?
That's a good point. John, Bridget, then in the back.
Okay, a couple of our regional universities do not accept the sophomore level organic, and even though it is the same course, basically, exactly. So that's an issue that we really have to iron out. Otherwise, our program is going to fall apart, or the FOSS won't work.
We've actually done some alignments of course content, and they match up really, really closely, and they still aren't accepted. So as a field of study, that might be something we want to address. If we think that the rigor, or four-year schools think the rigor isn't there, that maybe that needs to be addressed in the learning outcomes, of altering those learning outcomes for those sophomore level classes, such as organic, microgenetics. that the rigor at the 2-year level is increased sufficient to meet what the 4-year schools thinks it needs to be in order to accept those and transfer.
I think one of the trends that I've seen in all different kinds of biology, whether we're talking pre-med students, pre-dental students, or organismal biology majors, is that it's a molecular biology world. And at our institution, we require organic chemistry as a prerequisite for a senior level genetics and molecular biology course. And I think if you start building tracks where students are not required to take organic chemistry, they won't be prepared to function in a molecular biology world, which is the world that we're all going to be living in. So I think organics should be included in all of the degree plans for biology majors.
Okay. Go here and then over here.
Personally, I would love to see organic as part of the field of study, just to help clean up kind of this issue that I think we've all dealt with. But then that would add not just 2 classes to our designation, but 4 classes, right? Because we would have to, and then obviously include general chemistry in front of that for the freshman year. So now our biology field of study has 4 chemistry classes, which at this level I think is necessary. But I just thought I would point that out.
Yeah,
and just to follow up with your comment, David. You know, I do think that organic chemistry would be helpful for, organismal biologists. But if we decide to go on a track route, that might be something to talk about.
And it's pretty clear, I think, that's a good point to be made, that we're kind of growing this tree. We're going to prune it soon. Maybe we're not ready to prune it just yet, because I think it's a very thoughtful conversation that we're seeing each other's perspectives, especially at these different institutions. And so that's, I think, the good point to be made is, I think we're growing a pretty big tree at the moment. Well, we'll find it scalable in a little while. But let me go with Larry and then to Murad.
Yes, in regards to the organic chemistry for those fields that are not like pre-health or pre-dental, even in ecology, they're doing toxicology, they're doing a variety of different things. And so we need to take in mind that the chemistry is really a core to our biology. We are becoming more molecular, we are more focused in all the different fields. And I feel that even though we are adding additional courses onto this field of study, I would love to see all a 32-hour transfer with all this in it, because I think that would benefit every single student across the state.
Murad.
I just need to respond a bit to your, I understand that we're going big and all stuff when we have only 18 hours. We had the same thing, and what we did in the biology department in South Texas College, we took the chemistries 1 and 2, the 14, 11, 14, and 12, put them in the core, and we also require our students to take only the first course of organic in the field of study, and have the students, when they transfer, take the second course of organic at the university. So we still can maneuver those things out, and still we are getting the courses that we need.
Okay, going to the end here, and then go ahead.
So one of the things that I'm concerned about in terms of looking at this from a 4-year perspective, and maybe I'm not understanding what the field of study ends up, is that if we limit what 4-year institutions can require sophomores to take if those first 2 years, I think that really is a disservice to the 4-year institutions. If our students don't have, for instance, organic chemistry, they will not succeed in micro, they will not succeed in cell biology. If they don't have the math, they are not going to succeed in our biochemistry. They're not going to succeed in the genetics and the cell biology that we further offer. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is that maybe we set the field of study at a very high level, and maybe not all students that complete 2 years at a 2-year institution, they might not be able to complete all of these courses, but we can still maintain that level of rigor for a 4-year, and especially if the students unfortunately have to take developmental courses or courses that aren't starting at the calculus or the pre-calculus level, it might take them an extra year, or there might be, if we set the field of study high that says this is what you have to accept, but not even all four-year institutions might not require all of those courses, but if they have them, then we have to accept them. That's where I would like to see this go.
And I think that raises and I'll come back to you in just a sec, but that raises the second question. We've said, okay, what do students need to know? What do students need to succeed to? And especially in that transfer, in the matriculation and all those other issues, that's really where we're also thinking too. So there are a lot of different places we have to serve, and we're trying to find that combination that's going to serve that well. Let's go back to Gary.
I was going to say, I think it's becoming more clear that 18 hours is probably not realistic.
That's okay.
And as a 2-year administrator and faculty member, my big goal is to make sure that my students, if they get a degree in biology from me, they can hit the ground running when they get to you. Okay, and that's what they need. We're doing them a disservice if we're telling them, okay, you have an associate's degree in biology, but you're not going to be a successful biology transfer. Then what are we doing for them? So we need to be very clear on our goal here is, and that's one of the big goals is transfer success. Right? It's not about how fast can I get them through. I want them to go through my school as fast as they can, and I want them to complete a credential. But I want it to be a credential that has meaning when they leave me. And so if it means that we have a fairly large field of study, that may be what it means.
Okay. Let me go back to Gary, and then I'll come forward to you.
I'm listening to your conversation, and I'm, just letting a lot of it go. Y'all need to discuss this. It's y'all. But I want to go back and kind of talk about a little bit about the field of study versus the core and some of that kind of stuff for just a little bit. And then I want to talk about organic chemistry. Really and truly what y'all need to discuss is what does it take to level these students? In other words, what would a native student be across the state? And I know that the native students don't look perfectly the same across the state, but sometimes I am talking to faculty, people have said the least common denominator, and it's really not the least common denominator, it's the greatest common denominator, right? And so there's been a little bit of conversation about we require calculus, but then I think a lot of people don't require calculus, so maybe you don't address math specifically. But if you do need to address math, you address math. But some of this conversation about we count these as the core and we count this as that and that kind of stuff, you don't really need to focus on that. Hypothetically, and I'm making up an example, if students need 24 hours of science to enter their junior year, they need 2 biologies, they need they need biology 1 and 2, they need organic chemistry 1 and 2, and what are organic biology, or what's the other? Well, whatever. They need 4 separate sequences of science courses, and that's 24 hours. And you want to make sure that they all have speech 1301, because that's important. And I made that up as an arbitrary example. I don't know if it is important or not. That's really and truly needs to be your focus of your conversation. The individual colleges will then have to figure out how to deal with this from their core curriculum point of view, their degree plans, and all those kind of things. Does that make, the comment earlier about, well, we count the 6 hours in the core and the 2 hours in the component area option. The rule allows that you either count it 6 hours in the core, and then you count the other 2 as the component area option, or you count it as part of the degree plan. And so it's kind of like, is it 6 plus 2 here, or is it 6 plus 2 hours outside the core? But I'm going to say this generally, so if my core people are listening upstairs or anybody's listening, I'm not rewriting the core. It's part of the 60 hours, And I described my slide with the buckets. We don't necessarily have to get all the courses in the right buckets. We need to just talk about really the field of study, and then the buckets will get sorted back out. Does that make sense? And then is it organic chemistry, 1 and 2, sophomore versus junior? Okay. if y'all put that in the field of study, and it is the consensus, and the field of study is approved, then the universities that offer organic chemistry as a junior, senior level course, they can still keep their junior, senior level organic chemistries, but the students who transfer have those hours. And I'm just going to use the number 30. The student has a 30 semester credit hour field of study. Maybe it's biology, maybe it's something else, you know, and they transfer to a university. The student has 30 hours in the major. The statute doesn't necessarily say it's got to be this course, that course, and that course. Probably logically, the best way to deal with it is more of course by course, if that makes sense. But the student has got 30 hours in the major. A different subject area, we were dealing with transferability from a community college to a university, and they were changing a computer science course. And it's like, okay, you don't necessarily have to fill that square that you call it here, that you call it this, and they call it that. You don't necessarily have to do that, but the student's got 3 hours. How you deal with it is on them. But, you know, the question is, what are the right courses, and what's the best interest of the student? And I'm going to go back to what Alan kind of said at the beginning of, that's why this is a state level committee. It's not really this institution versus that institution. It's a statewide conversation. And, you know, if 99% require it or 95% require it or whatever, you know, it's a standard, which based on what I think I heard y'all say, I think it is, then that's probably the direction you need to go. But that's y'all's decision.
All right, we're going to take the, you had your hands up before, and then once we've had this last comment, I think we will take a quick break. So let's have this comment, and then we'll talk about what's happening in the break.
This is a very generic, basic question. I often get students that transfer into my institution, and I'm charged with looking at their transcripts and helping them make a new degree plan. And they come in core complete, but they've never had a single science course, and yet they say they're a science major. Literally none. And so my question is, we're talking about an associate's degree, presumably in biology. Those students can do something else. I don't know what you would call this that they come to me with, but it's not what we're discussing here. So is that an option at most community colleges or two institutions, that they can do sort of a general studies major and then come to a four-year institution and declare themselves a science major? You can imagine what happens when they do that. Now suddenly the only courses they need are science courses, and they're taking too many of them to be comfortable or possibly successful.
Well, and I think it raises another question, and it's probably particularly pertinent for the two-year institutions, which is the enthusiasm of the student. You know, we can't lose the patient in the treatment of the disease, so to speak. And I think there's some wisdom to be taken from the students actually taking some courses very early on in their program in order to discern that, yeah, this is something I really want to do, and it's something that I'm interested in. So if they're able to do what you're saying, where they're getting into a program they've not taken any courses in the sciences, that isn't serving them. I don't see how that could possibly serve them. And so it seems like any field of study would benefit from the students having a significant number of courses actually in their major.
Okay, quick comment, and then we'll take a break.
Just to address your comment, that was one of the reasons why at Lone Star we went with a biology associate's degree. And in that associate's degree, it is a 60 credit hour degree plan, but the students are not actually, technically core complete when they finish, because they do take a year of biology, 2 years of chemistry, a year of physics, and up to calculus and math. They do take a couple of core classes, English and government and stuff like that, but the plan was initially put together so that when they transferred to a four-year institution, they would have the needed science classes to be a junior in a science major.
Okay, I think this is a good time to take a brief break, say 10 minutes, or we'll try 10 minutes. I know how 10 minutes works, but what I'd like to do when we come back, since I think we've had some really good conversation, but perhaps we can start talking about biology courses. And maybe we could start with the list that we were given to evaluate, to kind of go through that list. So if you have that list, the break is a good time to pull that out so we can go through that sequence, okay? So we'll release everybody for a break.
Homework, so to speak. I think No, I think you're managing the discussion really well. I think it's good. No, it's good.
We're cueing everybody pretty well, I think, and you're seeing the people I don't see.
That's what the problem is with me, for me and myself, is they say, oh, yeah, we'll take.
We're missing one on the end. Okay, if nobody minds, I'm going to go ahead and start. We'll let come in. So on this worksheet that we were given, we have been asked to check whether a course is definitely yes or definitely no, or somewhere in the probablys. Okay, so what I thought is we could start with definitive ones, take the two ends, and then work on the middle. Okay, so and probably some of the middle is going to come out of that, I believe. So if you could take a look at what you have, what wound up in the definitely yes should be required of all biology majors of all specialties. And so remember, we're considering all biology majors of all specialties here. So we're not necessarily saying they should be this track or this track, but instead just saying this is biology. So what is a definite yes?
1406.
1406? We're pretty good.
Just all science major biologies.
All science major biologies?
Yeah, and I think that's probably part of the. Sorry, I wasn't on there. I think that's maybe one of the clarifications I had is that the 1306 would be a definitely yes if the FOS also required the lab that went along with it. Yeah, always in there.
Okay. Any other definitely yeses beyond the biology for science majors? And I'm sorry, we started with that too, but we're looking at what the definitely yeses should be included for biology. David.
Okay, I know you dealt with this, you said. How do you deal with the general biology 1 and 2 versus botany zoo? What we do is we accept either sequence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that a possibility here, or do we need to pick one?
I think we may have to pick one, is the feeling. And the institution may have to decide to, we've had to now shift to, because we've shifted to a new one, going into taking it as elective credit or something else instead of the botany zoo.
Right.
But before they would take it, something that, before the reverse happened, that when they had something that was like 1406, they would take it that as the elective credit, or possibly for one of the two courses that they had to take.
Okay.
Who else do we have lined up to speak? Yeah.
I go back to the days of it was only botany and zoo. There was no biology for science majors. That's what I go back to. And so then the biology for non-majors and majors came to be in the ACGM, and then we just ran into so many transferability issues. We just had to switch over to the biology for science majors. And so I think, to me, it's just up to the four-year college. If someone, if a college has the botany and the zoo still, they can look at it and decide. But as a group here, I think you've just got to go with the flow, the majors biology, 140607.
Sorry. Yeah, I came from the general botany, general zoo, but when we take in consideration the impact of genomics, we're dealing with so much more now. I don't want to make a choice between the two. I love zoo and I love botany, but what is the best thing for the student in the future? You know, do we have more of the other one, what we're dealing with science majors, or that one?
Bridget.
Along those lines is our molecular world that we're living in. We could probably make an argument that an intro to biotech versus 1407 might be a choice for students as well, because the 1407 isn't necessarily a molecular-based course traditionally, as it's traditionally taught.
Going back to the botany, and so do we have anybody sort of speak strongly that that's a definite yes? As a definite yes? No, I don't mean to single anybody out, but with the option.
Not saying that I wanted botany and zoo instead of 1406 and 1407. I wanted to have the option.
Okay.
You know, that was the way I had considered it.
All right, let me look at that then. I'm sorry? Yeah, they have labs. Go ahead, Tiana.
Wasn't the biotech course just eliminated from ACGM?
That I don't know.
We were successful in our appeal of that deletion. So they're
So
both
across the
being
state,
taught
or just-
across the state. They're 1414 and 1415 are not
back?
out of the ACGM.
Okay.
That is correct. They're back. Yay!
Are there any other definite yeses that we'd like to include? And we can dig deeper into that list. Anybody else come up with something that was a definite yes?
I had microbiology.
Yeah.
Any other votes for microbiology as a
Yeah,
definite
I had
yes?
some.
All right.
We talking about microbiology for major, right?
Yeah, I wanted to ask that question, 2421 or 2420? I take it it's the one for majors that we raised our hand for?
It sounds like it, yeah. Let me go to Bridget and then down at the end. I'm sorry.
So I guess on my definite no's, those were anything that was for non-science major, because if we're talking about biology majors, I don't understand why you would do anything for non-majors.
Okay.
I mean, that's my...
And we're going to talk about the no's in just a sec. Go ahead.
So with the microbiology, I don't think that should necessarily transfer. Many of the professional schools require microbiology at a junior, senior level course. So having, again, the students take this at the lower division is a disservice to the students who are going to go on, is because it will not fulfill the requirements for the professional schools. And again, I hate to see that come back to the students.
Frederick, you had your hand.
Yeah, along with the micro, also you run into the genetics issue of lower level versus upper level. So, I mean, I'm very much for keeping this lean and mean.
Okay.
And, you know, the gen bios, and then it becomes so variable based on institution.
Okay. Other comments on the micro and genetics or other? Well, let me start with following up on Frederick, the issue of what the. I agree. I like the lean and mean idea too. Is sort of we keep it keep it clear. Anybody else wants to comment on micro and genetics? So we'll go here and then here. And you.
The microbiology, I feel like making it part of this field of study transfer might not work. I like the lean and mean concept of it. I believe that institutions need to have a little bit of leeway in what they can do, especially in that sophomore year. If they want to offer microbiology, if they feel like it's going to work, fine. They should be able to do that. As for the genetics, if they want to offer it, that's fine. But the molecular genetics, I teach at the junior level, but I don't think that genetics should be part of the field of study.
Okay. We'll go with Rob and then with Bridget. And then.
Okay, I'm just looking at the spreadsheet that we got today, and there's 3 of the 6 that want micro in there. And then I'm looking at Texas Tech, which is on this spreadsheet, and I have their curriculum. Hold on. They don't look like they require it.
Must be them. No, that's
So,
down in the,
I guess, what we got to consider is if the students, again, they take the field of study and they become a junior, right? That's what we're trying to consider. They become a junior, they take a 2-year program, and then they go to a 4-year, and they're a junior when they start.
Right.
Because we have a majors micro. I'm at a 2-year, and they take that, and then they take a 3rd-year micro at our regional university, and they continue to go on.
All right,
So-
Bridget, and then we'll go to Alan.
Anyways, I guess that's the point I was going to make. You don't have
I
to
think
get
one
rid
of the things we have to address, if you're at a 2-year school and you're a biology major, what sophomore level class can you take that's going to transfer universally? You need sophomore level classes. I think we are doing a disservice to our students if we don't allow them to take sophomore level classes and actually have them get credit for them whenever they transfer.
And then,
The comment came in from Sherry McCullough. She writes here, I believe all science major biology courses should be required in addition to genetics and microbiology. It's my feeling that botany and zoology are covered in a good majors general biology course. Also, and just speaking for me, I'd like to echo Catherine's point that it's one thing it's worth keeping in mind is what are the requirements for professional schools? I mean, we're trying our best to serve the students in the biology major. That's our primary job. But it's also worth considering for those students who do go on to professional schools, are there certain courses that they expect to be taken at a certain level? Something else to keep in mind, it's less relevant to biology, but it's also accrediting agencies. If there are accrediting agencies who do, for various professions, who take a look at undergraduate coursework, I don't know if there are any, but if there are priorities about what course might need to be taken at what level is also something to consider.
okay, going down here. Okay. Do we have other hands up? Go to the end and then over.
As far as I can tell, is if we don't
Okay, we'll go with Larry and then back to Andrea.
In regards to the anatomy and physiology, we typically teach our anatomy separate from our physiology, although we do have substitutions for those particular ones. And the A&P that we're talking about at the sophomore level is typically not as rigorous as a solid semester of pure anatomy and a solid semester of pure physiology. So we feel that better prepares our students who are doing pre-health, pre-dental, that type of thing.
I've gotten a reminder from the tech booth to just remind everybody, Catherine and everybody, to make sure your mic's turned on, or they can't hear you on the web. Go ahead.
Okay, we're going with Andrea and then over here.
So I have a question for four-year institutions, like for A&M with Catherine. What classes are biology students taking at their sophomore level? Is it mostly, from what it sounds like, it's mostly you're suggesting they take organic instead of, genetics or A&P?
You can go ahead and respond if you'd like.
So what we require our biology majors to take at the second year is, we call them a course in cell and molecular and a course in ecology and evolution. There might be genetics in that second name also. But really what it is it's the same general content as the first year, but a repetition at a more rigorous and a higher Bloom's taxonomy, asking them to integrate more of what they've learned. So basically, a second dose of a repeat of the intro, because I think, and we've tried this, is, on the first day of these other classes, the sophomore years, we ask them some very basic questions that, 80 to 90% of the students got right when they left the class the previous year. And so we measure retention. And the students, I think, are better served instead of taking something that focuses really on the minutia of just memorizing a bunch of microbes, is let's go back through DNA replication again. Let's go back through the process of transcription translation. Let's go back through population genetics, ecology type concepts, again, a second year. And yes, chemistry for the higher levels is really more important than a specific biology course or A&P or micro or something, is get the foundational courses out of the way.
Okay, I had in the lineup going with you and then Jim and then over to Murad.
Okay, so to again go back to the anatomy and physiology course, as it was created originally and still very often taught out of the ACGM, is as a nursing or physical therapy assistant prerequisite course. And so that's its function in our curriculum. It's incredibly popular, but doesn't necessarily, between the level of rigor and the focus, I don't know that it's general enough for a biology field to study.
Okay, we'll go to Jim and then to Murad.
Actually, my comment was addressed a couple different places. So I'm going to
Okay, sure. Murad.
I just want to ask, Catherine, or everybody here, how many representatives here from universities that they emulate the same kind of type of system that A&M is adopting for the sophomore students, or the requirements, where they focus on the cell and molecular and the ecological aspects as a repetition to do that? Anybody?
Ours is changed to that now from what it was before, but yeah.
We're in discussion.
I'd just like to point out, though, if you look at the curriculum of microbiology, it actually is a cell molecular class. You go over transcription again, DNA replication again, all the stuff that you do from Biology 1406 is also taught in microbiology. Although I do agree that you need that repetition, and I think we should have a biology course in a biology degree plan for our sophomore year. But I also agree it's really important to have that chemistry background, as we discussed before. And so I guess one of the things I just want to bring up for us to collectively think about is how many science classes are we going to require all at once, right? Thinking of student success. So if we say, okay, by your sophomore year, you should be taking some organic, if that's the route we go. So now they're taking organic, and then we say, well, you should take some calculus if we decide on that. So now you're taking calculus. And then we said, oh, by the way, we'd really love you to take this microbiology course too, because that's really important. And it could be that it is, but now they're taking 3, big science classes, with labs. Is that going to be the best for all of our students if that's the way we recommend it. So just, I guess, something to keep in mind as we're discussing these classes and when we take them.
I think that's a point well made, is sort of thinking about, again, going back to the success is what they need to know and also what's make them successful. But I would like to solve that sophomore year problem of what do they take. It would be really good to have that as part of our, Larry, and then do I have any other hands before we, go ahead.
In regards to the biology during their sophomore year, I think that having a little more variability and allowing institutions to require something a little different at that point fits within whatever their emphasis is at that institution. Again, I think we need to go back to the most greatest common denominator, and that particular thing is going to be the chemistries, the physics, and the general biology. And then that will allow institutions to add whatever they feel like is necessary for their departmental emphasis as to what they want to do in the biology area.
Let's take ourselves in maybe a slightly different direction. Can we talk about our definitely no's? Because that might be easy to knock out, I'm thinking. So would anybody like to offer their suggestions for definitely no's right at this point? Bridget.
Anything for non-science majors.
Okay. Are we all, can a show of hands, yes? Is there any exception to that? I don't want to eliminate anybody who does offer that for their classes. Okay, so we're good for the elimination, or non-inclusion, not elimination, but we won't include in the field of study those that are for non-science majors. So those would be the 1308, 1408, 1309, 1409 options, as well as the micro for non-science majors, so the 2320, 2120, or 2420. Any other thoughts for definite no's? I think that's where we probably hit the easy one, but let's go with David and then Tiana and then to Murad.
Biology 1322 and 1323, nutrition and diet therapy.
Oh, yeah.
So let's raise that one just to talk about that specific one. Does anyone want to speak, not to put you in that place, but speak for it, to say, no, that one needs to be a possible? We're good at excluding or non-including? I'm going to say non-including. Okay, so we'll go on to Tiana's then.
Oh, I was going to recommend elimination of anatomy and physiology.
Okay, anatomy and physiology. Just a show of hands, people who would say yes on that.
Yes,
oh, yeah, sorry. Thank you for asking that question. How many would say that that is a definite no for inclusion? Would anybody like to speak for it? Yes, David. Or, sorry, Fredericks, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll, just as an example, my institution uses that course to cover the physiology group. We have multiple groups, basically different areas, and that's one of the main ones that's transferred in that we use.
Okay. Anybody else want to, yes?
We use it for the nursing. I mean, we have a lot of nursing students that transfer in that's gotten a course somewhere else, and they come there specifically to get certain courses, and one of them is anatomy and phys.
But are those biology, or is that appropriate for the biology field of study, or is that more something for the nursing?
It's, with the biologists, they're in there too, but they're non-majors, but it's mostly nursing.
Okay, so this would probably not fill the scope of what we're talking about with the biology field of study?
The biologists take it too. Both the majors and the non-majors take it because it's a sophomore class.
Well, let's rephrase the question. They take it, but is it something that all students should have coming in from the tier institution? Okay. Murad, and then at the end.
In South Texas College, Anatomy 1 is part of our field of study for biology majors, and also in our institution, we have many nurses. Quite frankly, we're almost 30,000 students, and in a semester there are 4,000 students coming in, and out of those 4,000, almost 2,000 of them are nurses, and they require anatomy and physiology as well. So yeah, we use it for both, for nurses as a transfer and for biology majors as a field of study.
Sure.
This one.
But we may have to still come back to that point of like, what's biology field of study? Let me come to the end, and then, was there somebody in the back? Yes, go ahead. So we'll go here first, and then.
So I could see anatomy and physiology at the 200 level coming into A&M as an elective. But what I would argue against is having it have to come in and say it counts for a 300 level A&P course. So I mean, I guess that if I'm understanding what we're trying to do here correctly is it's not saying that students shouldn't take it or wouldn't get something out of it, but it wouldn't necessarily directly check a box in a degree plan at A&M except for maybe a free elective. And I think that that would be fine. But again, to say that it's equivalent and we would have to accept it as a 300 level course when they don't have the same prereqs to take the course, I think becomes limiting for the four-year institutions. And it becomes, again, when the students that are going to go on, it is a disservice for them.
Okay, we're going to ask Jim for a clarification, then we'll go here and then here after.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
As I understood it, and it's Gary, is that right? When Gary was speaking earlier, I think if it's included in the field of study, you're not required at your institution to do a direct, so it doesn't necessarily mean that if they've taken a sophomore level anatomy and physiology that you have to have it count for your junior level anatomy and physiology, but you would have to accept it within that major. And so where it plugged in there, you would have to determine that. And I'm not advocating for it either. I'm simply saying that it doesn't necessarily, it's not a direct course for course swap. It's included in those credit hours towards their major.
Okay, and going back to the
I was just going to add that this anatomy and physiology is part of the field of study for nursing. So for nursing students, they're good to go with this. But for non-nursing students, I don't know that it's the best option.
Right. Okay, go ahead.
I'll just reinforce what she just said. At our institution, anatomy and physiology 1 and 2 is required for pre-nursing majors, and there is no prereq of having had any cellular molecular biology at all. So a lot of it's redundant with what they would have taken in an introductory principles of biology course, and since they're not prepared, it's not an upper level course really. Okay. It's a lower level course the way it's taught, and we accept it when it's transferred in as an elective, but not as a biology elective. They can use it for if they've taken both A&P 1 and A&P 2 with labs. We'll sometimes let them substitute that for mammalian physiology, which I don't really think is a great idea because it's a junior level course. So I'd say no to field of study on anatomy and physiology.
Okay.
I suspect that's probably true with microbiology 2421 as well. It would be my guess. I think I know for our nursing degree, it's a requirement in that degree plan.
Yes.
I just want some maybe make some clarification on the micro. I think a lot of institutions, including Lone Star, have a kind of an allied health micro, the 2420, which a lot of the pre-nursing students take along with their anatomy and physiology courses. And then there is a separate 2421, which is micro for majors.
Yeah, I'm sorry to speak out of turn, but we have that for we have a micro, and then we have a bacteriology class that tends to fill the role for the major. So it's named something totally different too, in order to recognize that it's not the same course, or it's targeted for majors. All right, and I think I lost my whole sequencing of people, but so it's okay if I reset. Let's any other suggestions for definite no's?
Biology 2404.
Biology 2404.
And it's a one-semester overview course, primarily intended for technical programs.
Okay.
And I don't think it's something a biology major should be.
Okay. Other comments on that? Yeah, Larry.
Oh, I agree with that on that one. I was going to mention the environmental biology course should be a no.
Okay.
2306, 2106, 2406.
Okay, anybody want to comment on the environmental biology? David, and then over here. Go ahead, David.
Well, considering the state of the world, I would think that having students engage in some knowledge of environmental science and environmental issues, I think would be a really beneficial thing. I realize that, I mean, when things like global warming are contested and pollution and all these things, I think it's important. Now, I mean, I was pretty enamored with that when I saw that on the list. I thought, well, but considering that there may not be room for it, may not be room for it. But I think it's a worthwhile course.
And this is really the whole point, is just to say, okay, some of us see it as a no. What would be its the value of it, or what would be maybe a reason to include it? So we're going to give each course sort of a fair hearing at least, and then we'll have our homework from Jim in a little bit. We'll go here, and then we'll go here.
We have evolution.
Can you turn your microphone on?
It is.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
We have faculty that are environmental faculty, and we have the pre-med faculty that all are part of biology. And so there's actually tracks. The pre-meds do not have to take environmental biology, but the people going into environmental sciences absolutely has to take it. It's part of their core. So to knock it as a no would be very difficult for us to figure out, well, what's their core? And because there's several courses like that for those students that are focused on environment, it's called biological environmental sciences. Just like the other part is biological sciences, and we have wildlife sciences. But I would vote not to put it no, but maybe someplace in the middle. So if you have this situation, it's not on the no category.
Well, it sounds like it may fit those that we're talking about as sophomore level classes that we might be speaking options then at some point. So let me go over here to Debbie.
How many of the two-year colleges actually offer environmental biology? Am I okay? Two-year
science.
The two-year. Yeah. Okay. All righty. Just curious because it's like I've not really run across it honestly. So
Good
just
question.
curious. Okay.
Yeah, Alan.
There is a way to do what you put as terms of a middle ground, which is if a course doesn't really belong in the field of study, you can recommend that students take it if it is available as a core curriculum option at their institution. So if their college offers environmental or an environmental course, you can recommend that, if it's available, it would be a good idea. We're not requiring it. We're not saying it's going to transfer as part of a biology degree program, but it's just a good recommendation. Other committees have done similar things for things like speech classes or technical writing classes. You might decide that technical writing doesn't really have a place in the field of study because space is very valuable there, but you all might agree that technical writing would be an awfully good thing for every biology major to have. So if a student, all other things being equal, has the option of taking that as part of their core, it'd be a good idea.
Yes, Larry, and then over here.
I'm not against students taking the ecology. In fact, our pre-med students are required to take ecology. What I'm trying to set up here is I'm focusing on the common things between all of our programs. I think that each university is going to have a different flavor when it comes to the biologies at the sophomore level and things like that. And I would rather keep that in there so that we have our individual programs, students look at us for that. But what I feel that we should focus on is what is our common ground here so that those students, if they decide they're going to move from, let's say, Stephenville, Texas to Houston, from their freshman, sophomore level, they're going to be able to transfer these courses, and it's transferred. And yeah, if they have some sophomore courses that they took, they can see how they fit those in those particular programs. So I would rather, it feels like we're kind of all trying to make ourselves all the same. Would I rather have some flavor in there, if you can see my point?
Okay, going here and then in the back.
And I guess one of the things that I'm thinking about during these discussions of both A&P and environmental sciences is, number one, do we feel that those are major level courses? So are we teaching A&P at the majors level? Are we teaching environmental sciences at the major level? And two, since we are focusing on transfer here from students from a 2-year school to a 4-year university, are these classes that are preparing them for upper level courses? Is it a class that they need for, say the MCAT or the PCAT or biochemistry or other courses that they'll be taking? I think if the answer is yes, then we have some way of talking about these courses. But if we're saying, well, environmental sciences would be nice, but I'm not sure what it's preparing them for, then maybe we need to focus on, other courses.
Yes.
On the subject of what does it prepare them for, one of the things I do is advise the people that are going to be teachers, and they have an exit exam that they have to take, and it definitely includes environmental science, and it definitely includes botany. So we wouldn't want to say that those courses are not useful for degree plans, because my students all would need to take that in order to pass the test that they have to do in order to be a certified teacher. And I'm sure there's other reasons to include diverse courses like ecology or botany, environmental science. So I don't think that's what we're trying to accomplish here, though. We're trying to distill it down to the basic, most important courses that they need in order to move into a 4-year institution to pursue those different paths, not to take away those different paths of diversity.
I guess one question to consider, and I agree, that's very well stated. I think that really hits it at the heart. Is if a course like environmental biology, if it had enough content duplication with one of the courses that we're pretty settled on our definite yes, like biology 1406, that maybe it could be taken in place of that. There might be some merit to do that, but I don't think it really. Yeah.
Okay. So after environmental biology, let me ask for any other definite no's. We'll just take last call on definite no's. We'll go with Uma, and then we'll go with Frederick.
This is not a definite no. I just want to know about it. What is the difference between the Biotech 1 and the Biotech 2 course? Could we just have Biotech 1, and if the students are interested, and then have Biotech 2 as part of the course, so I would just like to know about.
Bridget, you spoke to that earlier. Could you respond to that?
So the Intro to Biotech 1 is typically, its emphasis is in, both of them have an emphasis in lab, but the Intro to Biotech 1 typically has a more overview of what biotech is and the different sectors of biotech. And then the Intro to Biotech 2 focuses, when looking at the learning outcomes of that, on DNA and protein chemistry, and then the solutions and that kind of thing that support protein expression and using proteins.
Okay, because some of those labs that are actually covered, at least in our institutions, covered in the basic bio labs, we do that already. So the protein analysis, the DNA analysis, which is basically biotech. So I was just wondering if everybody's okay. We don't have to have both the courses. We just have any one of them as part of or we don't need to have both.
So if we included that in the field of study and it transferred in, how would that work?
It could only be, like Catherine was mentioning, it probably would give a credit towards an elective, but it will not be a credit towards a regular lab, but it would give a credit towards an elective, and it gives you a little bit a window into most of these biotech courses, if I understand you, Bridget, I think gives them a window into molecular biology, which is basically the DNA, the RNA, and the protein. And so that also piques their interest. If they are, they can go ahead and pursue it further. And if they are not, they can use that credit towards an elective when they transfer to a 4-year college. That's just a thought.
Okay. I'm going to go with Frederick because I had identified him first, and then we'll come over to Rob after that.
Yeah, just a question. Those last two academic cooperatives on the list, can someone tell me what those are?
I guess Bridget, and then, or whoever would like to respond, that's fine.
They're kind of like a research class. They have a strange name, but you're not supposed to do research at a 2-year, so they had to change the name, I think, because of that. So I just had one comment on the 1414. This class is a core class at our institution, and it's taught with an embedded research component, and there are no equivalent classes, in my knowledge, at the 4-year school that would take the place of this seriously. I mean, this is the students at our institution get to go and present their data at the end of the 2-course sequence, 1414 and 1415. They're going to be coming up here in March to the ASM meeting. Well, anyways, the point is, that's a class that is considered core because it touches on all kinds of areas, and it's very hands-on. They learn how to pipette, and I would argue you don't get that. You rarely get that in a 4-year until you're in grad school. I didn't get any research until I got to grad school. Now, if you're fortunate enough to go to UT Austin, they have the freshman seminar, and you get a research component. But this class is so I don't know. It's important for one of the things on the 60 by 30 text initiative is marketable skills. We have students that come out of these classes, they take 1 year of classes and they get a job with 1 year without even finishing an associate's degree. So I guess the importance of that class, I think it should be considered. Thank you.
Let's go with Larry, real quick first, and then Bridget, if you wanted to comment on that.
I brought biotechnology to the University of Houston Clear Lake as a master's program. One of the first things I did is I organized advanced labs at the junior and senior level. And so we have labs in tissue culture. We have labs at the junior level, senior level. We have advanced labs in molecular biology lab. We have advanced labs in a variety of different fields of biotechnology at the junior and senior level, which I feel is where it's more appropriate. The reason I feel it's more appropriate at those particular levels is because our students have already been through chemistry, they've already been through organic chemistry, and they can do some of the equations and problems that we put towards them in those particular areas. So they've also been introduced to concepts of viruses, they've been introduced to concepts of a variety of different things in the general biology. So even though I have a very strong background with biotechnology and the pushing of it, and we even have a certificate for our students to take it almost as a minor when they graduate, and they go and get jobs when they graduate with their bachelor's, I feel that for that to substitute in place of general biology 1 would be a mistake, because even though I've got a very good background in it, and I feel that I would rather have them have a general background at the freshman level. To me, this would be more applicable at the sophomore level than for it to be at the junior, than for it to be used as a field of study. That's how I look at it.
I don't know. Someone was proposing that it be replaced like the 1406. Is that what you're saying? That this would replace it? I think.
I'm sorry.
Biology 1406.
I thought we were
or
talking about the
1407.
intro to biotech.
We were talking about 1411 and 1415. But I don't think, I didn't make the argument that we'd replace biology with that, though. I guess I'm unclear where you were going with that.
Well, I thought you were saying that it would actually act as the, for the biologies at the freshman level? Is that what you're suggesting? That's what I thought you were asking.
Yeah.
I think the comment was just made that there's some similar content in those two
Yeah,
and similar
okay.
learning outcomes that are achieved in those. I'm going to have Jim. He wanted to say-
Did you
I'm
have
sorry,
something you wanted to
Bridget,
say for me?
Yes, there's a comment, my one comment for 1414 is I wouldn't substitute it for 1406 because it's a pre-co-rec within our degree plan for 1406. 1407, I think you could make that argument. I was going to address your question about what is the academic. So we do that academic co-op in two ways. They might go out into a lab. Our students have gone to UT Southwestern. They go into companies, or they can do it in-house in a lab. So you can do a variety of things. And a lot of times it's an independent research experience because we don't have that in the ACGM, an independent research experience at the 1 or 2 year. We use that instead for an independent research experience for our students. That's all I was going to address.
Okay, thanks for doing that. And then Jim.
Okay, so I want to be clear, I'm not advocating for this, but as a counterpoint just to what Larry was saying, because you made some really good points, but I one reason maybe to consider something like the biotechnology course, because of the hands-on nature that Rob was alluding to, there is some value. We have a lot of biotech embedded in our 1406, 1407, 2421, and some faculty that specialize in those areas. And there's some value to those students picking up some of the bench techniques that they need while they're taking those other courses like chemistry. So there's some value in doing that concurrently. And so that's something to consider. I don't know if that means we should include it in the field of study for all students to transfer or not. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but there is some value in those concurrent skills building.
Murad, and then I was going to add something.
As far as the 1414 and 1415, Bridget, right? You guys been teaching it. What is the financial obligation? How much it costs to run such courses? I understand that universities they might have a lot of money and they are more flexible to be able to teach those courses, but community colleges might not have the same resourceful to kind of run such labs. Pipettes and enzymes and electrophoresis units, and you have many sections every semester. So I would be very reluctant to. I mean, it could be part of the field of study, but there are limitations for community colleges to be able to have such a course in the study.
So actually, probably community colleges, believe it or not, might be better equipped to do that in some respects, because you can have Perkins money and use monies like that, especially if it's part of a workforce certificate. And so there's electrophoresis and micropipettes. There's a variety of ways that you can address that. A lot of the four-year schools don't have access to those kinds of funds to fund the labs for those pieces of equipment. So in many respects, it's harder for four-year schools to do it. I think one of the things that we might want to think about is, could we just have that be accepted? Not everybody has to offer it.
Okay, I'll take one more question, then I want to kind of redirect just a little bit. So go ahead.
Yeah, that's sort of where my comment was going to head, that occasionally the conversation is starting to sound like we're talking about eliminating classes from the curriculum, and that's not really our goal, right? As Larry says, we need, every institution needs to keep things that work for it. For us, biotech was our students had no success going out in the world with that stuff. Your students do, Rob, so you should keep offering this class. It's just what we're here, and so what we got to keep in mind is we're here to talk about what's sort of the standard minimum. What are the things that we feel most confident that every biology student needs, and then let individual institutions decide what works with their community and their student population and their workforce.
With us starting to get closer to the end time for this session today, I don't want to necessarily discuss it at the moment, but genetics was one that we haven't talked about, so it just might be one that we maybe put a pin in or think about it, because it seems to fit a lot of these other categories of courses too that are great courses, but we're not sure. They're probably in the middle for us, especially when we're working on a limited amount of space. The one we haven't, so I have two more items, I guess, to try to steer us to. One is We haven't talked about physics. I just want to kind of have a little bit of a discussion on physics because we did have an extended talk about chemistry and math. So because if physics appeared on here, I'm sure we have opinions on physics too. And then before we go, we're going to have sort of the homework, the ending assignment that we'll have for overnight for us to think about so we could be productive tomorrow. So we want to try to give some time for that. If that sounds good. So if we want to take or unless you have something to add.
Yes, I'd just like to remind everybody, the database that I gave you, that one that's the revised ACM course offerings, several of the courses that you're talking about aren't offered by many colleges. Right. This is a database here that I sent to you of all the courses in biology and the related fields that are in the ACGM, and the number of community colleges that offer it, the number of universities that offer it, and you can see some trends. I'm sorry, it's kind of an awkward database, but it's tons of numbers. These are the most recent numbers here. So please just bear this in mind when you're considering courses for the field of study. Ideally, it'll be a course that is already being offered at a large number of institutions. If you pick a course that's only offered by 16 community colleges, then you're talking about a major hiring spree and hire, faculty budgets that are going to have to be adjusted and all this to make sure that course content can be covered. So it's something to bear in mind when you're reviewing your data and the handouts and the attachments that I sent to you earlier. Thanks.
Thanks for bringing that up. I think that's important to take a look at, especially overnight as we look at things. So would anybody like to bring up an issue or talk about physics then as field of study, something to be included? We'll start with Frederick.
I think Physics 1 is very useful for all biology majors. It's once you get to Physics 2, then that one only tends to be more for the pre-health ones. So my leaning is towards, if we were to include it, would be just for the Physics 1.
Physics 1. Okay. Any other thoughts, any comments on that proposal or anything else on physics?
There was no, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Yes.
I think you make a really great point about physics for pre-med students and whatnot. And I don't think I have an answer to this question, but something for us to think about. How many biology majors, are pre-med, and how many do we think are preparing for something like the MCAT or the PCAT or these types of tests that are traditionally taken in your junior year that do test on physics? Because if it is a high number, if we feel that way, then maybe we would want both physics to be part of the FOS.
Okay. Yes.
Again, speaking from the position of somebody that advises people that are going to teach, both physics courses are necessary for my teachers. So that's another thing to consider. They need that both semesters in order to be teachers.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jim.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's a good comment, though. It's come up, several different people brought it up, and I want to continue to put it out here, that we really want to find the things that are going to be most useful for the largest number of students. And so if, the University Physics 2 is really only applicable to a portion of those students, requiring it for the others may not be to our advantage. And so something to consider.
Okay. Yes, Debbie.
What I've seen over the many years I've done this, because I do the scheduling, and we're a small college, so I don't know how much I should comment, but what I've seen is I put chemistry 1411 on the schedule, but I don't need I need fewer sections of 1412. I put the first semester of physics. I don't need the second semester at all, because I'll have them poll the students. How many of your students need the second half? Don't need it. Whatever they're doing, they don't need it. Organics that way, just needing the first semester. Certain medical programs are just cutting out. Calculus, Cal 1, fill it up. Cal 2, maybe one student is going to take it. So, I don't know if that feeds anything, but, I'm seeing that quite a bit. I don't know if those other colleges are just scaling back what they're requiring, but anyway, that's where I am with physics. Maybe we just need to have them do that first semester, and then, they can take the second.
Within the field of study, right, because that doesn't preclude the individual institutions from doing that as they need to. Yeah.
Okay. Well, one of the, I guess before we go on to to talk about what we'll do this evening, the first is that keeping the focus or thinking about when we're evaluating courses, what do students need to know, what's necessary for them, and thinking about the broadest possible range of areas that they're going to go into. The other is I think there's a logistics question that has come up several times in several ways when it came with labs or some of the courses at the 2,000 or 3,000 level, is how will we have this adopted? What factors will affect the adoption of the field of study? And so as we think about the courses that get included, how as we think about those courses, what influence will have on the adoption of the field of study? And that would be a good thing to include. I want to turn it over to Jim for a little bit to talk about what I think we want to sort of have as takeaways, and then I have something to add after, if you have that.
Okay, so in trying to prepare for tomorrow, Marcy and I were discussing this, and we think it'd be helpful if, so Alan sent out this list that we've been referring back to, this worksheet for the FOS committee, and tonight would probably be what we're advocating is tonight would be a good night to go back and revisit that, and particularly looking at the maybes, but then actually devise what you individually think your optimal 6 to 8 classes would be in that field of study, what your optimal FOS would look like, and bring that in tomorrow. And Alan, I don't know if we can have access to the screen, but we may be able to put up a spreadsheet and actually just kind of score that so we can really see where everybody sits very cleanly, and we can start out with that tomorrow, and that will let us then really focus on those areas where we have really significant differences.
If you'd like to email me your results, if I have time in the morning or this evening, if you get it done quickly, I can compile everybody's results into one Excel spreadsheet so we can see which ones come up.
That would be
come up
even
the
better,
quickest.
yeah.
So the sooner you send me that, the more likely I'll have time to. If you send it to me at 8:15, I'm not going to have time to do it. But if you send it to me either very early tomorrow or at some point tonight, I'll try to get all that compiled together.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Well, what Jim's asking for is your master list. If you were a committee of one deciding on the field of study, what would your choices be? All things taken into consideration. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
There's a question in the back.
So just a little clarification. Some of the courses on this list might be courses I really want my students to have, but not as freshman and sophomore classes. For example, genetics. I would not consider that a toss-off course, but I wouldn't want freshmen and sophomores taking it. I think they need more chemistry before they have their genetics class. We teach it as a senior level class. So what are we saying when we put this class off the list? Are we saying...
So as a committee of one, what would your optimal field of study look like? And the idea being tomorrow we can actually have a comparison, seeing all of those together. You might have a different, and I suspect you probably do have a different point of view than the nice lady who's sitting next to you, and that's okay. I think it sounded to me from the discussion we're pretty clear on the nose. We know the courses we pretty much don't want to have in there. We were all pretty much on the same page there. But the maybes might be an area tomorrow where we can really kind of flesh out the details of those. The goal, again, being tomorrow at the end of the day, we'd like to have those 6 or 8 courses that we want in that field of study that we know are going to be common to all biology majors, whether they're going pre-med or going wildlife or whatever it is, they're going to need those courses. We want to be sure that we've got those in there. Does that help? Yeah.
We'll go with Amanda. She's been taking notes all afternoon. So.
I just want to clarify, are we thinking about just the biology classes for the 6 to 8 or include chemistry, Cal 1 or
Yes.
Physics 1, everything, the whole shebang?
Yes, include, because then we can start thinking about what might be something that is going into core bucket, as was described earlier, or, we might be able to think about that. Larry, and then Debbie.
Okay. One thing to think about when we're trying to choose these particular courses for this field of study, a student taking college physics 1 and then transferring and then taking college physics 2 at another institution, sometimes it's a little difficult because it's a total different person teaching it, totally different approach. So I kind of want to take that in consideration when I'm putting together this field of study concept.
And each of us is going to be working from our own institutions and the student populations that we see, so, but we're going to try to converge on something that serves the many. Yes?
I'm asking a dumb question, but when you say a course, is that one semester? Or are you talking about like biology 1 and 2? That's one course.
That's 2, I think, yeah.
That's 2.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
that's all I
2.
need to know. Whoa, we're really limited. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then the next thing I wanted to know, and I thought I could have you guys do it individually, but maybe doing this in the larger group, and then if you want to follow up individually, that's fine. There have been some questions that have come out that we haven't necessarily been able to answer that are sort of about the process and that kind of thing, when you give options, that kind of thing. So do we have any sort of remaining questions that haven't yet been answered that might influence your choices of courses or our final decisions on field of study that we need some clarification on before tomorrow, and then we could give an update on the answers to those questions, or we may be able to get them now, possibly?
I have one, and I'm speaking out of ignorance of the field here. Are there any differences between those students who take a BA or a BS in biology? So that's something to consider.
Okay.
I mean, ideally, this would be a field of study that covers both BA and BS students. But if that's not possible or desirable, then that's a distinction that this committee will need to make.
Okay. Let me go down at the end of the table, and then Uma, you're next.
So are we sure it has to be like the maximum is 8 classes? Like, is that set in stone? Or
Don't constrain yourself to those 8. I mean, I think that we can also think about what might be captured by the core, let's say if it's a math, or what might be captured by the physical science or something.
So tonight in my committee of 1, right, which is surprising argumentative, I could come up with like 10 classes and email them to Alan and be like, okay, these are my... All right.
That's okay, yeah. Yes, going in the back.
Yeah, I was actually trying to answer.
Oh, I'm sorry, Uma, and then to the back, I apologize.
I was trying to answer Alan's question. Yeah, we do have a BA and BS in biology, but that differentiation comes closer in the junior and senior years. So I think in the field of study, I don't think we don't have to differentiate that at this point. I think pretty much it's the same basic foundation courses that will feed either degree.
It might be worth it for all of us to think about that, though, for the BA and BS students,
we do have that in our institution, and we differentiate it based on some special labs that are taken, some special research writing that is done, and research labs that are done, so.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good question to ask if that's true of all of the universities. So, I mean, and I'm not necessarily asking everybody to weigh in at the moment, but just sort of thinking about that. Going to the back, and then there's some other hands.
In my institution, we don't have that distinction, but at other schools at which I have worked, there is such a distinction, and the difference is math.
Math?
Okay. Calculus, and specifically, is the BS choice, and the BA doesn't have that math requirement.
Okay. Other questions that need clarification? David?
I'll just go ahead and chime in. At WT, we've got the BA, BS, and the difference in ours is that they have to have 12 hours, additional hours of fine arts beyond the core. And that includes foreign language. So,
okay, for the BA?
The BA,
Uh-huh.
yes, BS not.
Okay. Other lingering questions that we haven't had answered that we can do overnight or in the remaining time?
When you send me your information, it would be helpful if you use the exact course number so that I don't get confused between if you just say intro to biology, I don't know if that means 1 or 2 or both. So give me the specific course numbers if you would. And if you want to include labs, make sure that that's also clear in your indication. Include a lab as a separate course. And that way I'll know that could be either at the institution's discretion, either a 3+1 situation or a 4-hour course, since different colleges do it different ways.
No other questions? If you have individual questions for us afterward that you'd like to just share individually, that would be fine. And if you have also any feedback on how today went, I think we'd enjoy having that chance to hear anything you'd like to have changed for tomorrow, or concerns that you have, please, let us know. So since there is a little bit of time left, that's a good time for those individual types of
interactions. Can I adjourn us, or? Okay, just making sure they won't dock us our pay for the extra half hour. All right, I guess that, I'm sorry?
We want to ask any last questions, or there?
Last call for questions? Okay, if that, then I guess I can call us adjourned until tomorrow morning at 8:30 here. Same, 8:30. So you'll go home now and do work that you didn't do today and come back tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Some of you may want to take this time to email your colleagues, call your department chairs, speak to your dean, and see what the temperature is at home about some of the ideas that you heard today and what might be the opinions of your colleagues.